The story of the Indus Valley civilization begins not with grand cities or sophisticated urban planning, but in the windswept hills of Balochistan, where small communities of Neolithic farmers first learned to coax life from the harsh landscape. Around 7000 BC, at the site of Mehrgarh in present-day Pakistan, archaeological evidence reveals one of South Asia's earliest experiments in settled agriculture. French archaeologist Jean-François Jarige's excavations in the 1970s uncovered a settlement that would fundamentally reshape our understanding of how complex civilizations emerge from humble beginnings. The earliest inhabitants of Mehrgarh lived in simple mud brick structures, rectangular in plan and measuring roughly 4 by 6 meters. These dwellings featured storage compartments built into their walls, indicating a society already thinking beyond immediate subsistence needs. The floors, made of packed earth mixed with chaff, bore the marks of daily life. Hearths blackened by countless fires, grinding stones worn smooth by generations of grain preparation, and storage pits lined with waterproof plaster. What makes Mehrgarh extraordinary is not just its antiquity, but the clear evidence it provides of humanity's transition from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled agricultural life. The inhabitants of Mehrgarh cultivated wheat and barley, varieties that genetic analysis suggests were locally domesticated rather than imported from the Fertile Crescent. This independent development of agriculture represents one of humanity's great achievements, occurring simultaneously with similar developments in Mesopotamia and China. The presence of 6-row barley, a variety particularly well suited to the region's climate, indicates sophisticated understanding of plant breeding. Alongside these cereals, the Mehrgarh farmers grew field peas, sesame and dates, creating a diverse agricultural portfolio that would sustain population growth for millennia. Animal domestication proceeded alongside plant cultivation. The people of Mehrgarh kept goats and sheep, but more significantly they began the process of domesticating the water buffalo and zebu cattle that would become central to Indus Valley civilization. Archaeological remains show a gradual transition from hunting wild animals to managing domestic herds. The zebu, with its distinctive humped back and remarkable heat tolerance, proved particularly well adapted to the subcontinent's climate. These animals provided not only meat and milk, but also draft power for agriculture and transportation, enabling the agricultural surplus necessary for population growth and social complexity. The craft traditions that would later flourish in Harappan cities first emerged in these Neolithic settlements. Mehrgarh's inhabitants produced sophisticated pottery, initially hand-formed but gradually incorporating wheel-thrown techniques. The earliest ceramics were simple, undecorated vessels fired in open kilns, but by 5500 BC, potters were creating elaborate painted wares featuring geometric designs and animal motifs. The consistency of these decorative patterns across different sites suggests the emergence of shared cultural traditions and possibly specialized craft production. Metallurgy developed gradually but steadily. The earliest metal objects from Mehrgarh date to around 4500 BC and consist of small, copper ornaments and tools. These artifacts demonstrate knowledge of smelting techniques and the ability to work metal into desired shapes. The copper likely came from deposits in the nearby hills, indicating the development of trade networks that would later span the entire Indus region. Lead and bronze working followed, with craftsmen learning to alloy copper with tin to create harder, more durable tools and weapons. The geographic advantages of the greater Indus region cannot be overstated in understanding the rise of this civilization. The Indus River system, fed by monsoon rains and Himalayan snowmelt, created one of the world's most fertile alluvial plains. Unlike the unpredictable flooding of the Mesopotamian rivers, the Indus followed relatively regular patterns, rising during the summer monsoon and receding in winter, leaving behind nutrient-rich silt perfect for agriculture. This predictability allowed farmers to develop sophisticated irrigation systems and plan their agricultural cycles with confidence. The river system itself provided multiple advantages beyond fertile soil. The Indus and its tributaries served as highways for trade and communication, connecting communities across vast distances. Fish from the rivers supplemented agricultural diets, while reeds and other aquatic plants provided materials for basketry and construction. The rivers also provided the clay essential for pottery and brickmaking, resources that would become hallmarks of Harappan material culture. Climate during this formative period was more favourable than today. Paleoclimatic evidence suggests the region received greater rainfall, supporting more extensive forests and grasslands. This wetter climate sustained larger populations and more diverse ecosystems, providing abundant wild resources to supplement agricultural production. The gradual aridification that began around 4000 BC may have actually spurred innovation, forcing communities to develop more efficient agricultural techniques and stronger trade networks to secure resources. The transition from simple farming villages to proto-urban centres occurred gradually over more than a millennium. By 3500 BC, settlements like Kotdiji and Sind showed clear signs of increasing social complexity. The site featured defensive walls, suggesting organised community labour and possibly social conflict. Within these walls, excavations revealed evidence of craft specialisation, with distinct areas for pottery production, metalworking and beadmaking. The pottery from Kotdiji displays remarkable standardization, indicating either centralized production or widely shared technical knowledge. Trade networks expanded dramatically during this period. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan appeared in settlements throughout the Indus region, while shells from the Arabian seacoast reached communities hundreds of kilometers inland. Turquoise from Iran and copper from Rajasthan moved along established routes, creating economic interdependencies that bound distant communities together. These trade relationships required sophisticated systems of measurement, quality control and possibly credit, laying the groundwork for the commercial practices that would characterize mature Harappan civilization. Social hierarchies became increasingly evident in the archaeological record. Burial practices at sites like Harappa show clear distinctions in grave goods, with some individuals interred with elaborate pottery, jewelry and tools, while others received minimal accompaniments. These differences suggest the emergence of social elites, possibly based on control of trade, craft production, or religious authority. However, the relatively modest nature of even the richest burials indicates that social stratification remained limited compared to contemporary civilizations in Mesopotamia or Egypt. The development of standardized weights and measures represents another crucial step toward urbanization. Stone cubes found at multiple sites follow consistent proportional relationships, suggesting shared systems of measurement across the region. These weights, often made of precisely cut stone, indicate sophisticated mathematical knowledge and the need for standardized trade practices. The consistency of these systems across hundreds of kilometers suggests either centralized authority or remarkably effective cultural transmission. Technological innovations accelerated during this proto-urban phase. Potter's wheels became widespread, enabling mass production of standardized vessels. Kilns grew larger and more sophisticated, capable of achieving higher temperatures necessary for firing harder ceramics and smelting metals. The development of the potter's wheel also contributed to other technological advances, as the rotary motion principle was applied to other crafts and possibly to early transportation devices. The domestication of the water buffalo proved particularly significant for the region's development. These powerful animals, well adapted to marshy conditions, could work in flooded fields where cattle struggled. Their ability to pull heavy ploughs through wet soil enabled the cultivation of previously unusable land, dramatically expanding agricultural potential. Water buffalo also provided rich milk, leather, and eventually became central to the region's transportation networks, capable of carrying heavy loads across difficult terrain. Craft specialization reached new levels of sophistication by 3000 BC. Beadmakers developed techniques for drilling tiny holes through hard stones like carnelian and agate, creating products that would become hallmarks of Indus Valley craftsmanship. The precision required for this work suggests full-time specialists with years of training. Similarly, metalworkers mastered lost wax casting techniques, enabling the production of complex bronze objects, including tools, weapons, and decorative items. The emergence of proto-writing systems during this period remains controversial but intriguing. Pottery from late Kotdiji levels bears symbols that may represent early attempts at symbolic communication. While these marks fall short of true writing, they suggest growing needs for record-keeping and communication that would eventually lead to the undeciphered Indus script. The standardization of these symbols across different sites indicates shared conventions and possibly centralized authority. Religious and ritual practices evolved alongside social complexity. Figurines depicting female forms, possibly representing fertility goddesses, become more common and standardized. Fire altars appear at multiple sites, suggesting shared ritual practices focused on fire worship. The presence of ritual bathing areas at some settlements foreshadows the great baths that would become central features of Harappan cities. Urban planning concepts began emerging in the largest settlements. Sites like Remanderi show evidence of grid-patterned street layouts, with main thoroughfares running north, south, and east-west. Drainage systems, initially simple but increasingly sophisticated, managed wastewater and storm runoff. These innovations required community coordination and possibly centralized planning, representing crucial steps toward the urban sophistication that would characterize mature Harappan cities. The period from 3300 to 2600 BC witnessed the transformation of the Indus region from a collection of farming villages to a network of increasingly complex settlements poised on the brink of full urbanization. The foundations laid during these centuries, agricultural surplus, craft specialization, trade networks, technological innovation, and social organization, would support one of the ancient world's most remarkable civilizations. The transformation that swept across the Indus Valley between 2600 and 2500 BC represents one of history's most dramatic episodes of urban development. Within the span of a single century, the scattered proto-urban settlements that had evolved over millennia suddenly coalesced into massive, meticulously planned cities that would dwarf most contemporary urban centres worldwide. This urban revolution was not merely a matter of size, but of unprecedented sophistication in city planning, engineering, and social organisation. The emergence of Harappa marked the beginning of this urban transformation. Located in the Punjab region of present-day Pakistan, Harappa grew from a modest settlement into a sprawling metropolis covering over 150 hectares. Archaeological excavations by Sir Mortimer Wheeler in the 1940s and subsequent work by Pakistani and international teams revealed a city built according to principles that would not be seen again until Roman times. The settlement's strategic position along the Ravi River provided access to both fertile agricultural land and major trade routes connecting the mountains of Afghanistan with the Arabian Sea coast. Harappa's urban design reflected careful planning on a scale previously unknown in South Asia. The city was divided into distinct sectors, with a raised citadel mound to the west and a lower town to the east. This citadel, measuring approximately 460 by 215 metres, rose nearly 15 metres above the surrounding plain and was surrounded by massive defensive walls constructed of fired brick. These fortifications, some sections reaching 6 metres in thickness, incorporated sophisticated architectural features including salients, bastions, and carefully designed gateways that controlled access to the upper city. The lower town of Harappa demonstrated even more remarkable urban planning principles. Streets ran in perfect cardinal directions, creating a grid system with main thoroughfares measuring up to 10 metres in width. These primary arteries intersected at right angles with secondary streets approximately 5 metres wide, which in turn connected to narrow lanes barely 2 metres across that provided access to individual residential blocks. The consistency of this grid pattern across the entire settlement indicates centralised planning authority capable of implementing and maintaining urban design standards across vast areas. Mohenjo-Daro, located in Sindh province approximately 600 kilometres southwest of Harappa, emerged as perhaps the most spectacular example of Indus Valley urban planning. The site's modern name, meaning Mound of the Dead, belies the vibrant metropolis that once housed an estimated 40,000 inhabitants. Like Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro featured the characteristic division between citadel and lower town, but its preservation allows for more detailed analysis of Harappan urban design principles. The citadel at Mohenjo-Daro contained some of the most impressive public architecture of the ancient world. The Great Bath, a rectangular pool measuring 12 by 7 metres and 2.4 metres deep, was constructed with precisely fitted fired bricks and sealed with bitumen to prevent leakage. Steps at both ends provided access to the pool, while a sophisticated drainage system allowed for controlled filling and emptying. Surrounding the bath were galleries, private chambers, and what appears to have been a large assembly hall, suggesting this complex served important public functions, possibly related to ritual purification or community gatherings. Adjacent to the Great Bath stood a massive granary complex featuring a series of parallel halls with thick walls designed to protect stored grain from moisture and pests. Ventilation channels built into the floor allowed air circulation to prevent spoilage, while loading platforms facilitated the movement of heavy grain sacks. The granary's capacity, estimated at over 1,600 cubic metres, could store enough grain to feed thousands of people for extended periods, indicating centralised control over food distribution. The lower town of Mohenjo-Daro showcased residential architecture that prioritised privacy, hygiene and comfort. Houses, constructed primarily of fired brick, typically featured blank exterior walls facing the street, with all windows and doors opening onto interior courtyards. This design provided protection from dust, noise, and the intense heat of the Indus Valley while maintaining family privacy. Most houses contained multiple rooms arranged around central courtyards, with separate areas for cooking, storage, and sleeping. The sophistication of Harappan drainage systems surpassed anything seen in the ancient world until Roman times. Every house in Mohenjo-Daro connected to a comprehensive sewerage network that carried wastewater through covered drains running beneath the streets. These drains, constructed of precisely fitted brick and mortar, maintained consistent gradients to ensure proper flow. At regular intervals, manholes provided access for maintenance, while settling tanks and sumps removed solid waste before water continued downstream. The standardization of brick construction across Harappan cities reveals remarkable consistency in manufacturing and building techniques. Bricks followed precise proportional relationships, with the most common ratio being 4:2, one for length, width, and thickness. This standardization extended beyond mere convenience, indicating centralized control over construction materials and techniques. The uniformity of brick sizes across sites separated by hundreds of kilometers suggests either direct administrative control or widely accepted technical standards. Dholavira, located on Kadir Island in Gujarat's Rann of Kutch, demonstrated Harappan adaptability to challenging environmental conditions. This city, covering nearly 100 hectares, was built in one of the region's most arid zones, requiring innovative water management strategies. The inhabitants constructed an elaborate system of reservoirs, dams and channels that captured and stored monsoon rainfall. 16 reservoirs, some cut directly into rock and others built with massive stone walls, could store millions of litres of water during the brief rainy season. The water management system at Dolavira included sophisticated features like spillways, sluice gates, and distribution channels that regulated water flow throughout the city. The main reservoir, measuring over 70 metres in length, was lined with precisely cut stone blocks and featured steps that allowed access at different water levels. This engineering achievement enabled a thriving urban centre in an environment where water scarcity might otherwise have prevented large-scale settlement. Kalibangan, situated along the now dry Gaga River in Rajasthan, provided insights into Harappan agricultural practices and urban development in the eastern reaches of the civilization. The site featured the characteristic citadel and lower town division, but also revealed evidence of extensive agricultural fields with furrow marks still visible in the archaeological record. These furrows, running in two perpendicular directions, suggest a sophisticated understanding of crop rotation and soil management that maximised agricultural productivity. The development of the Indus script during this period represented a quantum leap in administrative and commercial sophistication. While the script remains undeciphered, its widespread use across Harappan sites indicates a standardized system of written communication. The script appears on seals, pottery, copper tablets, and other objects, suggesting multiple functions including trade identification, administrative record-keeping, and possibly religious or ceremonial purposes. Harappan seals, typically measuring 3 centimeters square, were carved from steatite and featured intricate designs combining script symbols with animal figures. The most common animals depicted include the unicorn, elephant, tiger, and water buffalo. These seals likely served as identification markers for merchants or officials, with each unique combination of symbols and images representing specific individuals or organizations. The discovery of identical seals at sites separated by vast distances indicates extensive trade networks and standardized commercial practices. The standardization of weights and measures reached unprecedented levels during this urban phase. Harappan weights, typically cube-shaped and made of precisely cut stone, followed binary and decimal systems simultaneously. The basic unit weighed approximately 13.7 grams, with larger weights following multiples of 16. This sophisticated mathematical system enabled accurate measurement across the entire civilization, facilitating long-distance trade and ensuring fairness in commercial transactions. The precision of Harappan weights is remarkable by any standard. Modern analysis reveals variations of less than 1% between weights of the same denomination found at different sites, indicating either centralized manufacturing or extremely rigorous quality control standards. The consistency extends to linear measurements as well, with a standard unit of approximately 33.5 centimeters appearing in architectural proportions across multiple cities. Social stratification became increasingly evident through housing variations and craft specialization. In Mohenjo-Daro, houses range from modest single-room dwellings to elaborate multi-story mansions with dozens of rooms. The largest residences featured private wells, elaborate drainage systems, and separate quarters for servants or workers. These variations in housing quality suggest significant differences in wealth and social status, though the absence of truly monumental architecture indicates that social hierarchies remained relatively modest compared to contemporary civilizations. Craft workshops clustered in specific neighborhoods, indicating professional specialization and possibly guild-like organization. Beadmaking workshops at Chanhu-Daro contained thousands of finished and partially completed beads, along with specialized tools for drilling, cutting, and polishing. The precision required for creating tiny holes through hard stones like carnelian demanded years of training and full-time dedication. Similarly, bronze-working areas featured furnaces, crucibles, and moulds for producing tools, weapons, and decorative objects. The apparent absence of monumental religious architecture distinguishes Harappan cities from their Mesopotamian and Egyptian counterparts. While fire altars and ritual bathing areas suggest religious practices, no structures comparable to ziggurats or pyramids have been identified. This absence may reflect different religious traditions, more egalitarian social structures, or simply archaeological preservation issues. The lack of obvious temples or palaces suggests that Harappan society, while clearly stratified, may have been less hierarchical than other contemporary civilizations. Trade networks expanded dramatically during this urban phase, connecting Harappan cities with regions as distant as Central Asia, Mesopotamia, and peninsular India. Harappan seals and artifacts have been found at Mesopotamian sites including Ur and Babylon, while Mesopotamian objects appear in Harappan contexts. This trade involved not only luxury goods like lapis lazuli and gold, but also bulk commodities including timber, metals, and agricultural products. The organisation required for this extensive trade network indicates sophisticated commercial institutions. Standardised weights and measures facilitated transactions across cultural boundaries, while the uniform quality of Harappan products suggests quality control systems that maintained the civilization's commercial reputation. The presence of what appear to be warehouses and trading posts at major sites indicates organised storage and distribution systems that could handle large volumes of goods. Manufacturing techniques reached new levels of sophistication during this period. Harappan craftsmen mastered the production of faience, a glazed ceramic material that required precise temperature control and chemical knowledge. Bronze working advanced beyond simple tools to include complex castings like the famous dancing girl figurine from Mohenjo-Daro, which demonstrates remarkable artistic skill and technical mastery of the lost wax casting process. Textile production, while poorly preserved in the archaeological record, appears to have been highly developed based on indirect evidence. Spindle whorls, loom weights, and dye vats found at multiple sites suggest large-scale cloth production. The presence of cotton seeds at Merga indicates that the Indus Valley may have been among the world's first regions to cultivate and process cotton into textiles, an innovation that would have significant economic implications. The urban revolution of 2600 to 2500 BC transformed the Indus Valley from a collection of agricultural settlements into a unified civilization characterized by unprecedented urban planning, technological sophistication, and commercial integration. These achievements in city planning, engineering, and social organization established foundations that would support Harappan civilization for the next 5 centuries, creating one of antiquity's most remarkable urban societies. The prosperity that sustained Harappan civilization for 6 centuries rested fundamentally on an economic foundation unlike anything previously seen in the ancient world. By 2500 BC, the great cities established during the urban revolution had evolved into nodes of a vast commercial network that stretched from the lapis lazuli mines of Badakhshan in Afghanistan to the pearl beds of Gujarat's coast. This transformation from regional urban centres to international trading hubs marked the beginning of the Harappan Golden Age, when standardised production, sophisticated logistics, and quality control systems enabled merchants from the Indus Valley to compete successfully in markets across the known world. Archaeological evidence from Lothal, a Harappan port city in Gujarat, reveals the extraordinary scope of this commercial enterprise. The site, covering 285 hectares along the Bhogavo River, featured what may be the world's oldest known dock, a rectangular basin measuring 214 by 37 metres and constructed with precisely fitted fired bricks. The dock's design incorporated a sophisticated lock system that allowed ships to enter during high tide and remain safely harboured when water levels dropped. Sluice gates controlled water flow, while a spillway prevented overflow during monsoon floods. The engineering precision required for this construction demonstrates not only advanced hydraulic knowledge, but also the economic importance of maritime trade to Harappan society. The dock at Lethal connected to a network of warehouses, workshops, and residential areas that supported a thriving port community. Excavations revealed evidence of bead-making workshops processing raw materials from across the subcontinent and beyond. Carnelian from Gujarat, agate from Maharashtra, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and turquoise from Iran were transformed into finished products that archaeological evidence suggests were exported throughout the Persian Gulf region. The scale of production was remarkable. One workshop area contained over 4,000 finished beads and thousands more in various stages of completion. The technical sophistication of Harappan bead-making surpassed contemporary production anywhere in the world. Craftsmen had mastered the art of drilling perfectly cylindrical holes through stones as hard as 7 on the Mohs scale, using bronze-tipped drills rotated by bow-driven mechanisms. The precision achieved was extraordinary. Holes barely 1 millimeter in diameter maintained consistent width and perfect straightness through beads up to several centimeters long. This level of technical mastery required not only individual skill, but also standardized training methods and quality control systems that ensured consistent output across multiple workshops. Harappan merchants established trading posts and colonies throughout their commercial sphere, creating a network of interconnected settlements that facilitated long-distance exchange. At Shortugai in northern Afghanistan, excavators found a complete Harappan settlement featuring characteristic urban planning, standardized brick construction, and typical Harappan artifacts. Located near lapis lazuli sources, this outpost served as a collection and processing center for one of the ancient world's most valuable commodities. The presence of Harappan seals, weights, and pottery at the site indicates direct administrative control, rather than merely commercial relationships with local populations. Similar Harappan settlements appeared along trade routes throughout Balochistan and into Central Asia. At Sutkagan Dor, near the modern Pakistan-Iran border, excavations revealed a fortified Harappan outpost controlling access to the Makran coast. The site's strategic position allowed monitoring of maritime traffic while providing secure storage for goods awaiting transshipment. The standardized architecture and material culture found at these distant settlements demonstrates the extent to which Harappan commercial practices had spread beyond the Indus Valley proper. The relationship between Harappan merchants and Mesopotamian civilization provides the clearest evidence of international trade connections. Mesopotamian texts from the Akkadian period refer to a land called Meluha, which scholars identify with the Indus Valley based on descriptions of products and trading practices. These texts describe Meluhans as suppliers of exotic goods, including ivory, precious stones, gold, and possibly cotton textiles. The presence of Harappan seals at Mesopotamian sites, including Ur, Kish, and Susa, confirms active trade relationships that persisted for centuries. At Ur, excavations in the royal cemetery revealed Harappan carnelian beads in elite burials dating to approximately 2500 BC, indicating that Indus Valley products had achieved luxury status in Mesopotamian society. The technical quality of these beads, with their perfectly drilled holes and lustrous surfaces, apparently commanded premium prices in foreign markets. Mesopotamian records suggest that Harappan merchants maintained permanent trading stations in major cities, facilitating regular commercial exchange and cultural contact. The standardization that characterized Harappan urban planning extended throughout their economic system, creating quality assurance mechanisms that supported their international reputation. Pottery production exemplified this systematic approach to manufacturing. Harappan ceramics followed consistent forms, decorative patterns, and technical specifications across hundreds of sites spanning nearly 1 million square kilometers. The famous Harappan storage jars, with their distinctive pointed bases and narrow necks, maintained virtually identical proportions whether found at Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, or distant trading posts. This standardization required sophisticated organizational systems that coordinated production across vast distances. Archaeological evidence suggests the existence of master craftsmen who travelled between settlements, training local artisans and ensuring adherence to established standards. The consistency of decorative motifs, technical specifications, and quality levels indicates centralized control over production standards, possibly enforced through guild-like organizations or administrative oversight. Metallurgy represented another area where Harappan craftsmen achieved remarkable standardization and technical excellence. Bronze production followed consistent alloy ratios, with copper-tin compositions typically ranging between 88 to 92% copper and 8 to 12% tin. This standardization was not accidental. It produced bronze with optimal properties for specific applications. Tools required harder alloys with higher tin content, while decorative objects used softer compositions that were easier to work but maintained attractive appearance. The scale of Harappan metal production was substantial. At Harappa itself, excavations revealed extensive copper-working areas with furnaces, crucibles and slag heaps, indicating large-scale smelting operations. Raw copper likely came from mines in Rajasthan and Balochistan, while tin sources remain uncertain but probably included deposits in Afghanistan or Central Asia. The logistics required to transport these raw materials, process them into standardized alloys, and distribute finished products throughout the civilization demonstrates sophisticated supply chain management. Textile production, though poorly preserved in the archaeological record, appears to have been a major component of Harappan commerce. Cotton cultivation, first developed in the Indus Valley region, provided raw material for what may have been the world's first large-scale textile industry. Spindle whorls found at numerous sites show remarkable consistency in size and weight, suggesting standardized thread production. The presence of dye vats and mordanting facilities at several locations indicates that Harappan textiles incorporated sophisticated colouring techniques that would have enhanced their value in international markets. Evidence for textile exports comes primarily from Mesopotamian sources, which describe fine fabrics from Meluha that were highly prized by elite consumers. The absence of significant textile remains in Harappan archaeological contexts may actually support the export hypothesis, as high-quality cloth would have been too valuable to discard casually. The technical knowledge required for cotton cultivation, processing, spinning, weaving and dyeing suggests a highly developed industry with specialized workers and sophisticated production methods. The administrative systems that coordinated this vast commercial enterprise remain partially mysterious due to the undeciphered Indus script, but archaeological evidence provides insights into their sophistication. The standardized weights and measures that characterized Harappan civilization extended beyond simple trade facilitation to encompass comprehensive systems of quality control, inventory management, and commercial regulation. Seals serve not only as identification markers, but also as guarantees of quality and authenticity that protected both merchants and consumers. The binary and decimal weight systems used throughout Harappan territory demonstrate mathematical sophistication that facilitated complex commercial calculations. Merchants could easily convert between different denominations and calculate quantities for bulk transactions. The precision of these weights, with variations of less than 1% between examples found at different sites, indicates manufacturing standards that would not be matched until much later periods in world history. Storage and distribution systems reached remarkable levels of organization during this period. The great granaries at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were complemented by smaller storage facilities at numerous sites throughout the civilization. These warehouses featured sophisticated ventilation systems, moisture control measures, and security arrangements that protected valuable commodities from spoilage and theft. The standardized design of storage facilities suggests centralized planning and possibly coordinated management across multiple locations. Archaeological evidence from Dolavira reveals additional aspects of Harappan commercial organization. The site featured what appears to have been a marketplace area with standardized stall foundations and associated storage facilities. The layout suggests regulated commercial activity with designated spaces for different types of merchants or products. The presence of public scales and measuring devices indicates official oversight of commercial transactions, ensuring fair dealing and maintaining the reputation of Harappan merchants. The diversity of goods flowing through Harappan trade networks was extraordinary for the ancient world. Archaeological finds include materials and finished products from virtually every region of South Asia and many areas beyond. Gold from Karnataka, silver from Afghanistan, copper from Rajasthan, tin from unknown sources, ivory from Gujarat forests, pearls from coastal waters, and precious stones from multiple locations all moved through Harappan commercial channels. This diversity required sophisticated logistics systems capable of coordinating multiple supply chains and managing complex inventories. Manufacturing centres specialised in processing these diverse raw materials into finished products for both domestic consumption and export. At Chanhu Daro, excavations revealed extensive workshops producing seals, beads, pottery, and metal objects. The organisation of these workshops suggests assembly line production methods with different craftsmen specialising in specific stages of the manufacturing process. This division of labour increased efficiency and quality while reducing production costs, giving Harappan merchants competitive advantages in international markets. The technical innovations that supported this commercial expansion included advances in transportation, communication, and production technology. Harappan merchants developed standardized containers for bulk goods, wheeled carts for overland transport, and boats capable of navigating both rivers and coastal waters. The uniformity of cartwheel dimensions found at multiple sites suggests standardized axle widths that allowed interchangeable parts and simplified maintenance during long-distance journeys. Quality control systems extended beyond standardized weights and measures to encompass comprehensive testing and certification procedures. Archaeological evidence suggests that finished products underwent inspection before distribution, with substandard items rejected or recycled. This systematic approach to quality assurance maintained the reputation of Harappan products in competitive international markets and supported premium pricing for superior craftsmanship. The economic prosperity generated by this commercial system supported not only the great cities, but also hundreds of smaller settlements throughout Harappan territory. Archaeological surveys have identified over 1,400 Harappan sites, ranging from major urban centres to small farming villages and specialised production centres. This settlement hierarchy indicates a sophisticated economic system that coordinated production, processing, and distribution across multiple levels of organisation. Regional specialisation became increasingly pronounced during this period, with different areas focusing on particular products or production stages. The Kholistan region specialised in agricultural production, Gujarat concentrated on maritime trade and bead manufacturing, Balochistan focused on mineral extraction and processing, while the core Indus Valley cities served as administrative and commercial centres, coordinating the entire system. The economic prosperity that sustained Harappan civilization created a society whose social organisation continues to puzzle archaeologists and historians. Unlike their contemporaries in Mesopotamia and Egypt, where monumental architecture and elaborate royal burials clearly delineated rigid hierarchies, Harappan society presents a more enigmatic picture. The archaeological evidence suggests a civilization that achieved remarkable coordination and standardization without the extreme social stratification typically associated with early urban societies. Housing patterns across Harappan cities reveal a society with significant but not extreme social differentiation. At Mohenjo-Daro, residential architecture ranged from modest single-room dwellings measuring barely 3 by 4 metres to elaborate multi-storey mansions covering over 200 square metres. The largest residences, such as the so-called Priest King's House, featured dozens of rooms arranged around multiple courtyards, private wells, sophisticated drainage connections, and separate quarters that may have housed servants or extended family members. These mansions incorporated architectural refinements, including decorated doorways, ornamental brickwork, and carefully planned ventilation systems that provided comfort during the intense summer heat. However, the contrast between rich and poor housing was far less dramatic than in contemporary civilizations. Even the smallest Harappan dwellings typically included private courtyards, access to the municipal drainage system, and standardized brick construction. The ubiquity of private wells throughout Harappan cities meant that even modest households enjoyed access to clean water, a luxury reserved for elites in many ancient societies. This relative equality in basic amenities suggests either strong social cohesion or effective municipal governance that ensured minimum living standards for all residents. The standardization of household artifacts across different social levels provides additional evidence for a relatively egalitarian society. Pottery, tools, and personal ornaments found in modest dwellings often match the quality and style of those from wealthy residences. The famous Harappan storage jars, with their distinctive forms and decorative patterns, appeared in households throughout the social spectrum, suggesting that even luxury goods were accessible to middle-class families. This distribution pattern contrasts sharply with contemporary civilizations where elite goods were strictly reserved for the upper classes. Burial practices at Harappan sites reinforce the impression of limited social stratification. The cemetery at Harappa contained graves with varying quantities of burial goods, but none approached the lavish displays found in Mesopotamian royal tombs or Egyptian pyramids. The richest Harappan burials included pottery vessels, bronze mirrors, shell bangles, and occasional gold or silver ornaments, but these grave goods represented modest wealth rather than extreme luxury. More significantly, the burial positions and treatment of bodies showed remarkable consistency across social levels, suggesting shared religious beliefs and cultural practices that transcended economic differences. The absence of obvious royal or priestly burials has led some scholars to propose that Harappan society was governed by merchant guilds or republican institutions rather than monarchical dynasties. This hypothesis gained support from the apparent lack of monumental palaces or temples that typically housed ancient rulers. The largest public buildings at Harappan sites, such as the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro and the granaries at multiple cities, served community functions rather than glorifying individual rulers. Analysis of skeletal remains from Harappan cemeteries reveals additional insights into social organization and daily life. The population showed relatively good health and nutrition, with average heights comparable to modern South Asian populations. Evidence of healed fractures and dental work suggests access to medical care across social levels. However, some individuals showed signs of occupational stress, including repetitive strain injuries in the hands and wrists of craftsmen and spinal problems in labourers who carried heavy loads. These patterns indicate specialised occupations, but also suggest that even manual workers enjoyed sufficient nutrition and healthcare to live productive lives. Religious and ritual practices in Harappan civilization must be reconstructed entirely from archaeological evidence, as the undeciphered script provides no textual insights into beliefs and ceremonies. The most famous religious artifact, the limestone sculpture dubbed the Priest King found at Mohenjo-Daro, depicts a bearded figure wearing a trefoil-patterned robe and an elaborate headband. The figure's half-closed eyes and serene expression suggest meditation or spiritual contemplation. while the sophisticated carving technique demonstrates the high artistic standards achieved by Harappan sculptors. The Priest King statue measures 17.5 centimetres in height and was carved from a single piece of steatite, then covered with a lime paste and painted. The trefoil pattern on the robe, filled with red pigment, may represent a sacred symbol, while the headband incorporates a circular ornament that could signify religious or political authority. The figure's carefully groomed beard and moustache, along with a precise rendering of facial features, suggests portraiture of a specific individual rather than a generic representation. The absence of obvious royal regalia, however, makes the figure's exact role uncertain. Ritual bathing appears to have played a central role in Harappan religious practice, as evidenced by the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro and similar facilities at other sites. The Great Bath's construction incorporated waterproofing techniques using bitumen and gypsum mortar that prevented leakage, while the surrounding galleries and chambers suggest ceremonial processions or gatherings. The pool's dimensions and the precision of its construction indicate that ritual bathing was sufficiently important to justify major public investment. Smaller bathing facilities appeared throughout Harappan cities, suggesting that ritual purification was practiced at both community and household levels. Many private residences included dedicated bathing areas with carefully constructed drains that connected to the municipal sewerage system. The emphasis on cleanliness and water management in Harappan urban planning may reflect religious beliefs about purity and pollution that would later become central to South Asian religious traditions. Fire altars discovered at multiple Harappan sites provide evidence for another important ritual practice. These installations, typically constructed of fired brick and featuring central fire pits surrounded by offering areas, suggest ceremonies involving burnt offerings. At Kalibangan, excavators found a series of fire altars on the citadel mound, arranged in rows and associated with bathing platforms and wells. The standardized construction of these altars across different sites indicates shared ritual practices and possibly centralized religious authority. The altars contained ash and charcoal deposits, along with fragments of pottery and animal bones, suggesting offerings of food and drink to deities or ancestors. The presence of terracotta cakes, possibly representing bread or other baked goods, indicates that grain products played a role in religious ceremonies. These practices may represent early forms of the fire worship that would later become prominent in Vedic religion, though direct connections remain speculative. Fertility symbolism pervaded Harappan material culture, suggesting religious beliefs focused on agricultural prosperity and human reproduction. Terracotta figurines depicting women with elaborate headdresses and jewellery appear at sites throughout the civilization. These figures, often showing exaggerated feminine characteristics, likely represented mother goddesses or fertility deities. The consistency of their iconography across vast distances suggests shared religious beliefs and possibly organised worship practices. Male fertility symbols also appeared in Harappan art, including the famous dancing girl bronze figurine from Mohenjo-Daro and numerous phallic stones found at various sites. The dancing girl, measuring 10.5 centimetres in height, depicts a nude female figure with one arm on her hip and the other adorned with bangles. The figure's confident pose and elaborate jewellery suggest high social status, while the technical mastery required for the lost wax casting demonstrates sophisticated metallurgical skills. Animal symbolism played a prominent role in Harappan religious iconography, with certain species appearing repeatedly on seals and other artefacts. The unicorn, depicted on nearly 60% of Harappan seals, may represent a mythical creature or a stylized version of a real animal such as the rhinoceros or aurochs. The consistent portrayal of this animal across the civilization suggests it held special religious or symbolic significance, possibly serving as a protective deity or clan totem. Other animals frequently depicted in Harappan art include elephants, tigers, water buffalo, and various birds. The elephant appears both as a naturalistic representation and in more stylized forms, sometimes associated with human figures or ritual scenes. Tigers shown with characteristic stripes and powerful builds may have represented strength or served as symbols of particular deities. The presence of these animals in urban contexts, where they would not have been encountered in daily life, suggests their symbolic rather than literal significance. Daily life in Harappan cities revolved around well-established routines supported by sophisticated urban infrastructure. Most families rose before dawn to avoid the intense heat that characterized much of the year in the Indus Valley. The first task involved drawing water from private wells or public sources, using standardized pottery vessels that archaeologists have found in virtually every household. These water jars, with their distinctive narrow necks and pointed bases, were designed to keep contents cool through evaporation while minimizing contamination. Breakfast typically consisted of wheat cakes or barley porridge, prepared on terracotta griddles over wood or dung fires. Archaeological evidence suggests that Harappan families consumed a varied diet including wheat, barley, peas, sesame, dates, and melons. Meat consumption appears to have been limited, with water buffalo, cattle, and goat providing occasional protein supplements. The standardized grinding stones found in most households indicate that grain processing was primarily a domestic activity, though large-scale milling facilities at some sites suggest commercial production for urban markets. Children in Harappan society enjoyed access to sophisticated toys and games that provide insights into both recreational activities and educational practices. Terracotta toys included miniature carts with movable wheels, animal figurines, and whistles shaped like birds. These toys, found in houses across the social spectrum, suggest that childhood play was valued regardless of family economic status. The technical quality of many toys, with carefully modelled details and functional moving parts, indicates specialised craftsmen dedicated to children's entertainment. Board games represented another important recreational activity, with several examples discovered at Harappan sites. The game boards, typically made of fired clay or stone, featured geometric patterns of squares or holes that may have been used with dice or game pieces. The rules of these games remain unknown, but their presence in multiple households suggests they were popular pastimes that brought families together during leisure hours. Jewellery and personal adornment played significant roles in Harappan daily life, with both men and women wearing elaborate ornaments made from precious metals, stones, and shells. Archaeological finds include gold and silver bangles, necklaces of carnelian and agate beads, shell ornaments, and bronze mirrors. The technical sophistication of Harappan jewellery, particularly the precision drilling of stone beads and the delicate metalwork of gold ornaments, demonstrates highly developed craftsmanship and aesthetic sensibilities. The distribution of jewellery across different social levels suggests that personal adornment was accessible to most urban residents, though the quality and materials varied according to economic status. Even modest households contained shell bangles and simple bead necklaces, while wealthy families possessed elaborate gold ornaments and precisely crafted stone jewellery. This pattern indicates a society that valued personal appearance and had developed efficient production and distribution systems for decorative objects. Clothing in Harappan society must be reconstructed from indirect evidence, as organic materials rarely survive in archaeological contexts. However, the presence of numerous spindle whorls, loom weights, and dyeing vats indicates sophisticated textile production. Cotton cultivation in the Indus Valley provided raw material for what may have been the world's first large-scale cotton textile industry. The standardized sizes of spindle whorls suggest consistent thread production, while the variety of dyeing facilities indicates that Harappan textiles incorporated multiple colors and decorative patterns. The famous Priest King statue provides the clearest evidence for Harappan clothing styles, showing a figure wearing a robe decorated with trefoil patterns. The garment appears to be draped rather than tailored, suggesting clothing styles that emphasize flowing fabrics rather than fitted construction. The elaborate headband worn by the figure, along with similar ornaments found in archaeological contexts, indicates that headwear played important roles in indicating social status or religious affiliation. Household activities in Harappan cities were organized around central courtyards that served multiple functions. These spaces provided areas for food preparation, craft activities, storage, and social interaction. The courtyards also served as light wells that illuminated interior rooms and provided ventilation during hot weather. Most courtyards included wells, storage areas, and cooking facilities that made them the focal points of domestic life. Food preparation involved sophisticated techniques and equipment that enabled varied and nutritious diets. Harappan kitchens typically included multiple types of cooking vessels, storage containers, and processing tools. Large storage jars held grain supplies, while smaller vessels contained spices, oils, and other ingredients. Cooking techniques included boiling, roasting, and baking, with specialized equipment for each method. The presence of tandoor-like ovens at some sites suggests that bread baking was an important culinary technique. The organization of craft production within households indicates that many families supplemented their income through specialized manufacturing. Bead-making workshops appeared in residential areas, with entire families involved in different stages of production. Children might sort raw materials, women could perform detailed drilling work, and men handled the more physically demanding tasks of stone cutting and polishing. This household-based production system enabled efficient use of family labour while maintaining quality control through direct supervision. Domestic animals played important roles in Harappan household economy and daily life. Water buffalo provided milk, draft power, and eventually meat, while serving as valuable assets that could be traded or sold during economic difficulties. Cattle fulfilled similar functions, though they appear to have been less common than water buffalo in urban contexts. Chickens provided eggs and meat, while dogs served as companions and guards. The standardized feeding troughs and animal shelters found at many sites indicate systematic care for domestic animals. The sophisticated urban centres and extensive trade networks that characterized mature Harappan civilization required coordination on a scale unprecedented in the ancient world, yet the mechanisms by which this coordination was achieved remain among archaeology's most perplexing mysteries. Unlike their contemporaries in Mesopotamia, where cuneiform tablets document the activities of kings and their bureaucracies, or in Egypt, where hieroglyphic inscriptions glorify pharaohs and their divine authority, the Harappans left behind no decipherable records of their political organization. This absence of textual evidence, combined with the puzzling lack of obvious royal palaces or monumental architecture celebrating individual rulers, has forced scholars to reconstruct Harappan governance systems entirely from material remains. The standardization that permeated every aspect of Harappan civilization provides the most compelling evidence for centralized administrative control. The uniformity of brick sizes across sites separated by hundreds of kilometers could not have been maintained without systematic oversight and quality control mechanisms. At Harappa, standard bricks measured 28 by 14 by 7 centimeters, following a precise 4:1 ratio that appears at Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, Kalibangan, and dozens of smaller settlements. This consistency extended beyond mere convenience to encompass a comprehensive system of technical standards that governed construction practices throughout the civilization. The precision of Harappan weights and measures reveals even more sophisticated administrative systems. Stone cubes used for weighing followed binary progressions with remarkable accuracy, varying less than 1% between examples found at different sites. The smallest weight unit, approximately 13.7 grams, was multiplied by factors of 2, 4, 8, and 16 to create larger denominations. Simultaneously, a decimal system operated alongside the binary progression, with weights of 100, 200, and 500 units serving commercial transactions. This dual mathematical system required not only advanced understanding of numerical relationships, but also institutional mechanisms to maintain standards across vast territories. Linear measurements showed similar standardization, with a basic unit of approximately 33.5 centimeters appearing in architectural proportions throughout Harappan territory. This Harappan foot governed the dimensions of streets, buildings and public works with consistent application that suggests centralized planning authority. The main thoroughfares at Mohenjo-daro measured precisely 10.5 meters in width, exactly 30 Harappan feet, while secondary streets maintained consistent widths of 5.25 meters or 15 feet. Such precision across multiple cities indicates systematic urban planning that extended far beyond local administrative capabilities. The drainage systems that connected every Harappan house to comprehensive sewerage networks demonstrate coordination between individual construction and municipal infrastructure that required sophisticated administrative oversight. At Mohenjo-daro, covered drains running beneath the streets maintained consistent gradients and construction standards that ensured proper wastewater flow throughout the city. The integration of private household drains with public sewerage systems required building codes and inspection procedures that coordinated private construction with municipal engineering projects. Archaeological evidence suggests that Harappan administrative systems operated through a combination of centralized standard setting and decentralized implementation. The uniformity of technical specifications indicates central authority capable of establishing and enforcing civilization-wide standards, while regional variations in decorative styles and local adaptations suggest considerable local autonomy in implementation. This balance between standardization and flexibility may have been key to maintaining political stability across such vast territories and diverse environmental conditions. The absence of clearly identifiable palaces or royal residences in Harappan cities presents one of the most significant challenges to understanding their political organization. Unlike Mesopotamian cities, where massive palace complexes housed rulers and their extensive bureaucracies, Harappan settlements contain no buildings that obviously served as royal residences. The largest structures, such as the Great Bath and Granary complexes at Mohenjo-daro, served apparent public functions rather than glorifying individual rulers or providing private luxury for elite families. The so-called Priest King's House at Mohenjo-daro, despite its modern designation, shows no clear evidence of royal occupation. This large residence, covering approximately 200 square meters, featured multiple courtyards, sophisticated drainage connections, and high-quality construction, but lacked the throne rooms, audience halls, or treasure chambers typically associated with royal palaces. The building's layout suggests wealthy merchant or administrator housing rather than monarchical residence, indicating that even the elite lived in structures that prioritize comfort and functionality over political display. This absence of monumental royal architecture extends to religious buildings, where Harappan cities again differ dramatically from contemporary civilizations. Mesopotamian ziggurats and Egyptian temples served not only religious functions, but also as symbols of royal power and divine authority. The lack of comparable structures in Harappan cities suggests either different religious traditions that did not require monumental architecture or political systems that did not depend on religious legitimacy for royal authority. The interpretation of this architectural evidence has led scholars to propose various alternative models for Harappan political organization. Some suggest that the civilization was governed by merchant oligarchies, where wealthy traders collectively managed urban centers and coordinated interregional commerce. The sophisticated commercial systems and standardized production methods that characterized Harappan civilization would have required extensive coordination that merchant organizations could have provided without centralized royal authority. Alternative theories propose that Harappan cities were governed by republican institutions similar to those that would later emerge in ancient Greece and Rome. The apparent absence of extreme social stratification, combined with the lack of obvious royal symbolism, suggests political systems that may have distributed power among multiple officials or governing councils, rather than concentrating authority in individual rulers. The standardized public works and coordinated urban planning could have been achieved through collective decision-making processes rather than monarchical decree. The undeciphered Harappan script provides tantalizing but frustrating clues about administrative organization. Seals bearing script symbols appear in contexts suggesting official functions, possibly serving as identification markers for administrators or commercial organizations. The standardization of seal formats and the consistency of certain symbol combinations across different sites indicate systematic record-keeping practices that required literate administrative personnel. However, the brevity of most inscriptions suggests that the script may have served primarily for identification and basic record-keeping rather than complex administrative documentation. Analysis of seal distribution patterns reveals possible insights into administrative hierarchy and territorial organization. Certain seal types appear more frequently at larger urban centers, while others concentrate in smaller settlements or specialized production sites. This distribution may reflect administrative ranks or functional specializations within a broader governmental system. The presence of identical seals at sites separated by hundreds of kilometers indicates either direct administrative control or standardized commercial practices that transcended local political boundaries. Comparison with contemporary Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations highlights the unique characteristics of Harappan political organization. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform tablets from sites like Ur and Babylon document complex bureaucratic hierarchies, with specialized officials managing taxation, military affairs, religious ceremonies, and commercial regulation. Royal inscriptions celebrate military victories, construction projects, and divine favor, providing clear evidence for monarchical authority and its ideological justification. Egyptian civilization during the same period featured even more centralized royal authority, with pharaohs claiming divine status and constructing massive monuments to ensure their immortality. The pyramid complexes at Giza, built during the 4th dynasty, required coordination of tens of thousands of workers and represented state resources on a scale that dwarfed any known Harappan construction project. These monuments served not only as royal tombs, but also as symbols of pharaonic power that reinforced political authority through architectural grandeur. The contrast with Harappan civilization is striking. While Mesopotamian and Egyptian rulers invested enormous resources in monuments celebrating their individual achievements, Harappan leaders, if they existed, apparently prioritized practical infrastructure that served entire communities. The sophisticated drainage systems, public baths, and granary complexes that characterized Harappan cities represented collective investments in urban welfare rather than individual glorification. This difference in priorities may reflect distinct political ideologies or practical adaptations to environmental and economic conditions. The Harappan emphasis on trade and commerce may have required more collaborative political structures that could coordinate complex economic activities without the rigid hierarchies that characterized agricultural states in Mesopotamia and Egypt. The environmental challenges of the Indus Valley, including seasonal flooding and periodic droughts, may have favored political systems that emphasized collective resource management over individual accumulation of wealth and power. Archaeological evidence for conflict and warfare in Harappan civilization remains surprisingly limited, contributing to debates about whether these societies were unusually peaceful or whether evidence of violence has simply not been preserved. The defense walls that surrounded major cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro indicate awareness of potential threats, but these fortifications appear designed more for flood control and urban organization than military defense. The walls at Harappa, constructed of fired brick and reaching heights of up to 15 meters, incorporated sophisticated drainage systems and featured gateways that facilitated commercial traffic rather than military control. Weapons found in Harappan archaeological contexts consist primarily of tools that could serve dual purposes rather than specialized military equipment. Bronze axes, spears, and daggers appear in relatively small numbers and show design characteristics that suggest use for hunting, craft activities, or personal protection rather than organized warfare. The absence of large weapon caches, military barracks, or battle scenes in Harappan art contrasts sharply with contemporary civilizations, where warfare played prominent roles in political organization and cultural expression. The scarcity of evidence for internal violence has led some scholars to propose that Harappan society was remarkably peaceful, possibly governed by consensus-based political systems that minimized conflict through negotiation and compromise. Skeletal remains from Harappan cemeteries show relatively few signs of violent trauma, though preservation conditions may have obscured evidence of soft tissue injuries. The standardized burial practices and modest grave goods found throughout Harappan territory suggest social systems that avoided the extreme inequalities that often generated internal conflict in other ancient civilizations. However, alternative interpretations suggest that the apparent absence of warfare evidence may reflect different military traditions or preservation issues rather than genuine pacifism. Harappan armies may have relied primarily on organic weapons like wooden clubs or leather armour that would not survive in archaeological contexts. The civilization's extensive trade networks would have required protection from raiders and bandits, necessitating military capabilities that may not be visible in current archaeological evidence. The debate over Harappan militarism extends to interpretations of urban planning and architectural features. The elevated citadel areas at major cities could have served defensive functions, providing refuges during attacks and secure storage for valuable resources. The controlled access points and narrow gateways that characterize these citadels would have facilitated defense by small numbers of warriors against larger attacking forces. The standardized construction techniques used in these fortifications suggest coordinated military planning that required central authority and specialized knowledge. External threats may have played more significant roles in Harappan political organization than internal conflicts. The civilization's position along major trade routes would have attracted attention from nomadic groups and rival states seeking to control lucrative commercial networks. The Harappan outposts in Afghanistan and Balochistan, often featuring defensive walls and strategic positions, suggest awareness of external threats and systematic efforts to protect trade routes and resource sources. The relationship between Harappan merchants and foreign powers provides another perspective on political organization and military capabilities. Mesopotamian texts referring to Meluhha describe diplomatic and commercial relationships that apparently operated without major military conflicts. This suggests that Harappan political systems were sufficiently organized and militarily capable to negotiate as equals with major contemporary powers, even if they chose to emphasize commerce over conquest. The evidence for specialized craft production and quality control systems indicates administrative capabilities that could have supported military organization if required. The coordination necessary to maintain standardized production across hundreds of sites demonstrates logistical expertise that could have been applied to military supply and coordination. The sophisticated transportation networks that moved raw materials and finished goods throughout Harappan territory could have facilitated rapid military communication and troop movement when necessary. Regional variations in Harappan material culture suggest political organization that balanced central coordination with local autonomy. While technical standards remain consistent across the civilization, decorative styles and local adaptations indicate that individual cities and regions maintained distinct identities within the broader Harappan system. This balance may have been crucial to maintaining political stability across such diverse territories and populations. The gradual decline of Harappan civilization after 1900 BC may provide insights into the strengths and weaknesses of their political systems. The apparent absence of sudden collapse or violent destruction at most sites suggests that political institutions may have gradually lost effectiveness, rather than being overthrown by internal rebellion or external conquest. This pattern could indicate that Harappan political systems, while effective during periods of prosperity and environmental stability, may have lacked the flexibility or coercive power necessary to adapt to changing conditions. The sophisticated political systems that governed Harappan civilization, whether centralized monarchies or merchant oligarchies, found their most tangible expression in the remarkable technological achievements that distinguish these cities from all contemporary urban centers. The engineering marvels that characterized mature Harappan settlements represented not merely impressive construction projects, but systematic solutions to the fundamental challenges of urban life in the Indus Valley's demanding environment. These technological innovations required coordinated planning, specialized knowledge, and quality control systems that operated across vast territories with unprecedented consistency. The hydraulic engineering systems that supplied water to Harappan cities surpassed anything achieved in the ancient world until Roman times. At Mohenjo-daro, over 700 wells provided water access throughout the urban area, with individual wells serving clusters of houses or individual wealthy residences. These wells, constructed with precisely fitted fired brick rings, descended through multiple soil layers to reach reliable groundwater sources. The standardized well construction techniques ensured consistent water quality and prevented contamination from surface pollutants. Each well ring measured exactly 1 meter in internal diameter, with walls 12 centimeters thick, demonstrating the systematic approach that characterized all Harappan engineering projects. The sophisticated wellhead designs incorporated features that protected water supplies from contamination, while facilitating efficient water extraction. Raised brick platforms around well openings prevented surface runoff from entering the water supply, while carefully constructed drainage channels directed overflow away from the well sites. The wells featured stepped internal construction that allowed maintenance workers to descend for cleaning and repair operations, ensuring long-term functionality of these crucial water sources. Archaeological analysis of well sediments reveals that these systems remained operational for centuries, testament to both their initial construction quality and ongoing maintenance programs. The drainage systems that connected every Harappan house to comprehensive sewerage networks represented perhaps the civilization's most impressive technological achievement. At Mohenjo-daro, covered brick drains ran beneath every street, maintaining precise gradients that ensured consistent water flow from residential areas to main collection channels. These drains, constructed with carefully fitted bricks and waterproof mortar, incorporated manholes at regular intervals for inspection and maintenance access. The main drainage channels measured up to 2 meters in width and featured corbelled brick roofs that could support the weight of street traffic while protecting the sewage flow below. The integration of household drainage with municipal systems required sophisticated coordination between private construction and public infrastructure. Every house connected to the street drains through carefully constructed branch channels that maintained proper flow angles and incorporated settling chambers to remove solid waste. The household drains featured removable brick covers that allowed residents to clear blockages, while the municipal system included larger settling tanks and sumps that required coordinated maintenance by specialized workers. This comprehensive approach to waste management prevented the accumulation of sewage that plagued other ancient cities and contributed to the remarkable health standards evident in Harappan's skeletal remains. The water management systems at Dolavira demonstrated Harappan engineering capabilities adapted to extreme environmental conditions. Located in one of the subcontinent's most arid regions, this city developed innovative techniques for capturing, storing, and distributing scarce water resources. the engineers constructed 16 reservoirs of varying sizes, the largest measuring over 70 metres in length and capable of storing millions of litres of monsoon rainfall. These reservoirs featured precisely cut stone walls with sophisticated waterproofing techniques, using clay and lime mortar that prevented seepage losses. The D'Oliveira water management system incorporated advanced hydraulic engineering principles, including spillways, sluice gates, and distribution channels that regulated water flow throughout the dry season. The main reservoir featured a step design that allowed access at different water levels, while smaller distribution tanks located throughout the city ensured equitable water access for all residents. The system included stormwater channels that directed monsoon runoff into the reservoirs while preventing flood damage to residential areas. This comprehensive approach to water management enabled a thriving urban centre in an environment where water scarcity might otherwise have prevented large-scale settlement. The construction of these water management systems required sophisticated surveying techniques to ensure proper gradients and flow patterns. Harappan engineers demonstrated remarkable precision in calculating the slopes necessary for consistent water flow across long distances. The drainage systems at Mohenjo-Daro maintained gradients of approximately 1/500, optimal for sewage flow while minimizing erosion of the brick channels. This level of precision required not only mathematical knowledge, but also practical surveying tools and techniques that could translate theoretical calculations into accurate construction specifications. Metallurgical achievements in Harappan civilization encompassed both technological innovation and systematic quality control that enabled large-scale production of standardized metal objects. Bronze working reached unprecedented levels of sophistication, with craftsmen mastering alloy compositions that optimized material properties for specific applications. Analysis of Harappan bronze artifacts reveals consistent copper-tin ratios that produced optimal hardness and durability for tools, weapons, and decorative objects. The typical bronze composition contained 88 to 92% copper and 8 to 12% tin, proportions that required precise measurement and quality control during the smelting process. The lost wax casting techniques developed by Harappan metal workers enabled the production of complex bronze objects with intricate details and precise dimensions. The famous dancing girl figurine from Mohenjo-Daro demonstrates the technical mastery achieved through this process, featuring delicate anatomical details and elaborate jewellery that would have been impossible to achieve through simple mould casting. The lost wax process required specialized knowledge of wax modeling, ceramic shell construction, and precise temperature control during bronze pouring. The consistency of casting quality across multiple sites indicates standardized training methods and quality control procedures that maintained technical standards throughout the civilization. Large-scale bronze production required sophisticated furnace designs capable of achieving temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius, necessary for copper-tin alloy smelting. Archaeological excavations at Harappa revealed extensive metalworking areas with multiple furnaces, crucibles, and slag disposal areas that indicate industrial-scale production. The furnaces incorporated advanced features including forced air systems using bellows, refractory brick linings that withstood repeated high-temperature cycles, and carefully designed flue systems that maximized fuel efficiency while maintaining optimal smelting conditions. The standardization of metal tools and weapons across Harappan territory demonstrates quality control systems that ensured consistent performance characteristics regardless of production location. Bronze axes, spears, and knives found at different sites show remarkable uniformity in dimensions, weight, and alloy composition. This standardization required not only consistent raw material quality, but also standardized production techniques and finishing procedures that created interchangeable products suitable for widespread distribution. The production of specialized tools for different crafts indicates sophisticated understanding of metallurgical principles and their practical applications. Harappan metalworkers produced different bronze alloys optimized for specific uses. Harder alloys with higher tin content for cutting tools, softer compositions for decorative objects that required detailed working, and intermediate alloys for general-purpose implements. This specialization required extensive knowledge of material properties and systematic testing procedures to optimize alloy compositions for particular applications. The construction techniques employed in Harappan cities incorporated innovations in materials design and execution that enabled the creation of durable urban infrastructure capable of supporting large populations for centuries. The systematic use of fired bricks represented a major technological advance over the sun-dried brick construction typical of contemporary civilizations. Harappan kilns achieved temperatures exceeding 900 degrees Celsius necessary for complete brick firing, producing construction materials with superior strength, durability and water resistance compared to unfired alternatives. The standardization of brick dimensions across the entire Harappan civilization required sophisticated quality control systems that operated at multiple levels of production and distribution. The standard brick ratio of 4:2, one for length, width and thickness, appeared at sites separated by hundreds of kilometers, indicating either centralized production or rigorously enforced technical specifications. This standardization enabled efficient construction techniques using interchangeable components, reduced construction costs through economies of scale, and facilitated repair and maintenance operations using readily available replacement materials. The mortar systems developed by Harappan builders incorporated advanced chemical knowledge that produced waterproof joints capable of withstanding centuries of weathering. Analysis of Harappan mortar reveals sophisticated compositions using lime, gypsum and organic additives that created strong, flexible bonds between bricks. The waterproofing techniques employed in structures like the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro incorporated bitumen and specialized mortars that prevented water penetration through multiple layers of brick construction. Architectural innovations in Harappan construction included advanced foundation techniques that provided stable support for multi-story buildings in the challenging soil conditions of the Indus floodplain. Deep foundation systems using carefully graded stone and brick provided stable bases for major structures, while sophisticated drainage systems prevented water accumulation that could undermine structural stability. The construction techniques incorporated expansion joints and flexible connections that accommodated ground movement without structural failure, demonstrating advanced understanding of soil mechanics and structural engineering principles. The public buildings that served Harappan communities incorporated architectural features that required sophisticated planning and construction coordination. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro featured complex waterproofing systems, precisely fitted stone steps, and surrounding galleries that required coordination between multiple specialized construction teams. The granary complexes incorporated advanced ventilation systems with carefully designed air channels that prevented grain spoilage while protecting stored supplies from pests and moisture. Private residential construction demonstrated systematic application of advanced building techniques across all social levels. Even modest Harappan houses incorporated sophisticated drainage connections, standardized room proportions, and construction details that required skilled craftsmen and quality materials. The consistency of construction standards across different economic levels suggests either comprehensive building codes or widespread technical knowledge that ensured minimum quality standards for all urban construction. The transportation infrastructure that connected Harappan cities and facilitated long-distance commerce incorporated engineering innovations that enabled efficient movement of goods and people across challenging terrain. The dockyard at Lothal represented one of the ancient world's most sophisticated port facilities, featuring a rectangular basin measuring 214 by 37 metres, constructed with precisely fitted fired bricks. The dock incorporated a complex lock system that allowed ships to enter during high tide and remain safely harboured when water levels dropped, while spillways prevented overflow during monsoon floods. The engineering precision required for the Lothal dock construction demonstrates advanced understanding of tidal mechanics, hydraulic engineering, and marine construction techniques. The dock walls, constructed with specially shaped bricks that interlock to resist water pressure, incorporated drainage systems that prevented structural damage from hydrostatic forces. The entrance channel featured carefully calculated dimensions that accommodated the largest vessels while maintaining adequate water depth during different tidal conditions. The road systems that connected Harappan settlements incorporated engineering features that facilitated efficient transportation while minimizing maintenance requirements. Archaeological evidence reveals standardized road widths and construction techniques that created durable surfaces capable of supporting heavy cart traffic. The main thoroughfares featured carefully graded surfaces with drainage systems that prevented water accumulation and erosion damage. Secondary roads incorporated standardized widths that accommodated the wheeled carts, whose axle dimensions show remarkable consistency across the civilization. The logistics of maintaining urban infrastructure across such vast territories required sophisticated organizational systems that coordinated specialized workers, raw materials, and technical knowledge. The consistency of construction standards and maintenance practices across hundreds of Harappan settlements indicates systematic training programs for craftsmen and standardized procedures for infrastructure maintenance. This coordination required not only technical expertise, but also administrative systems capable of managing complex supply chains and quality control procedures across vast distances. The communication networks that enabled coordination of this extensive infrastructure incorporated both physical and organizational innovations that facilitated information transfer across the Harappan sphere of influence. The standardized weights and measures that characterized Harappan commerce enabled efficient communication of technical specifications and quality requirements across vast distances. The uniform seal systems provided standardized identification methods that facilitated coordination between different administrative centers and production facilities. The sophisticated communication networks that enabled coordination of Harappan infrastructure found their most enigmatic expression in the undeciphered writing system that appeared on thousands of artifacts throughout the civilization. These brief inscriptions, typically consisting of 3 to 5 symbols arranged in horizontal lines, represent one of archaeology's most persistent puzzles and continue to generate intense scholarly debate nearly a century after their initial discovery. The Indus script, as it has come to be known, appears on seals, pottery, copper tablets, ivory rods, and bronze implements across the entire geographical range of Harappan civilization, suggesting a standardized communication system that operated across vast distances and diverse cultural contexts. Statistical analysis of the approximately 4,000 known Indus inscriptions reveals systematic patterns that provide insights into the script's structure and possible functions. The corpus consists of roughly 400 distinct symbols, a number that falls between the range typical of logographic systems like Egyptian hieroglyphs and syllabic scripts such as Linear B. This intermediate complexity has led scholars to propose that the Indus script combined logographic elements representing whole words or concepts with phonetic symbols representing sounds or syllables. The frequency distribution of individual symbols follows patterns consistent with natural languages, with approximately 10 symbols accounting for nearly 40% of all occurrences in the corpus. The most frequently occurring symbol, resembling a vertical stroke with horizontal lines extending from its base, appears in roughly 15% of all inscriptions, and often occupies the initial position in symbol sequences. This distribution pattern suggests it may have functioned as a determinative marker, indicating the category or type of information contained in the inscription, similar to the semantic classifiers used in Chinese writing or the determinatives in Egyptian hieroglyphs. The second most common symbol, appearing in approximately 8% of inscriptions, resembles a jar or vessel and frequently appears in final positions, possibly serving as a grammatical marker or indicating the nature of the commodity or transaction being recorded. Computational analysis using modern statistical techniques has revealed significant insights into the script's underlying structure. Researchers applying entropy calculations and n-gram analysis have demonstrated that the symbol sequences exhibit properties consistent with linguistic communication rather than random decoration or simple pictographic representation. The conditional entropy measurements, which analyse how predictable subsequent symbols are based on preceding ones, fall within ranges typical of natural languages and known writing systems. These findings strongly support the interpretation of the Indus symbols as representing a true writing system rather than merely decorative motifs or simple identification marks. The directional analysis of Indus inscriptions reveals consistent writing conventions that suggest systematic orthographic rules. Approximately 95% of inscriptions read from right to left, though some examples show boustrophedon writing where alternate lines change direction. The consistency of this directional preference across different types of objects and geographical locations indicates standardized literacy practices that were maintained throughout the civilization. The rare instances of left-to-right writing typically occur on objects where spatial constraints may have dictated alternative arrangements, suggesting that scribes possess sufficient flexibility to adapt standard conventions when necessary. Symbol positioning within inscriptions follows patterns that may reflect grammatical or syntactic structures. Certain symbols consistently appear in initial positions, others cluster in medial locations, and still others predominantly occupy final positions within sequences. This positional distribution resembles the grammatical ordering found in known writing systems where different types of words or morphemes occupy predictable positions within sentences or phrases. The mathematical analysis of these positional preferences has enabled researchers to identify potential word boundaries and grammatical categories within the undeciphered script. The contextual distribution of inscribed materials provides crucial evidence for understanding the script's functions and the extent of literacy within Harappan society. Seals represent the largest category of inscribed objects, accounting for approximately 60% of all known examples. These seals, typically measuring 2, 3 centimeters square and carved from steatite, feature brief inscriptions combined with animal motifs and geometric designs. The standardized format and high production quality of these seals suggest they served official functions, possibly as identification markers for merchants, administrators, or craft guilds. The discovery of identical seals at sites separated by hundreds of kilometers indicates either direct administrative control or standardized commercial practices that transcended local boundaries. Pottery inscriptions represent the second largest category of inscribed materials, appearing on storage jars, serving vessels, and specialized containers throughout Harappan territory. These inscriptions typically consist of 1 to 3 symbols incised or painted before firing, suggesting they were integral to the vessel's intended function, rather than later additions. The symbols often appear near handles or rims where they would be easily visible during use, supporting interpretations as ownership marks, content identifiers, or capacity indicators. The standardization of these pottery marks across different production centres indicates systematic marking practices that facilitated trade and inventory management. Copper tablets bearing Indus script inscriptions represent a smaller but significant category that may provide insights into administrative record-keeping practices. These tablets, typically rectangular and measuring 3-5 centimeters in length, feature carefully incised symbols that show evidence of deliberate planning and execution. The durability of copper as a writing medium suggests these tablets were intended for long-term preservation, possibly serving as permanent records of important transactions or agreements. The limited number of copper tablet inscriptions may indicate that this writing medium was reserved for particularly significant communications, or that organic writing materials, which would not survive in archaeological contexts, were more commonly used for routine record keeping. Ivory and bone objects bearing script symbols provide evidence for the script's use on organic materials that would have been available for everyday writing purposes. These inscriptions, found on rods, combs, and decorative objects, demonstrate that literacy extended beyond official administrative contexts to include personal possessions and domestic items. The technical skill required to incise symbols on these hard organic materials indicates specialized craftsmen who possessed both artistic ability and literacy skills, suggesting that writing and craft production were closely integrated within Harappan society. Metal objects, including bronze implements and silver ornaments, occasionally bear Indus script symbols, though these examples represent a small fraction of the total corpus. The technical challenges involved in inscribing symbols on metal surfaces suggest that these marked objects held special significance, possibly serving ceremonial functions or indicating high-status ownership. The quality of metalwork on inscribed objects consistently exceeds that of unmarked examples, supporting interpretations that link literacy with elite social status and specialized craft production. The geographical distribution of inscribed materials reveals patterns that may reflect administrative hierarchies and communication networks within Harappan civilization. Major urban centres like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro have yielded the largest numbers of inscribed objects, with particularly high concentrations of seals and copper tablets. Smaller settlements typically contain fewer inscribed objects, predominantly pottery marks and simple seals, suggesting that complex literacy practices were concentrated in major administrative and commercial centres. The presence of inscribed materials at distant outposts like Shortugai in Afghanistan indicates that the script served communication needs across the entire extent of Harappan influence. Comparative analysis with contemporary writing systems provides context for evaluating the Indus script's characteristics and functions. The Proto-Elamite script, used in southwestern Iran during roughly the same period, shares several features with the Indus system, including brevity of inscriptions, combination of logographic and phonetic elements, and primary use on administrative objects. However, the Proto-Elamite corpus includes longer texts and more obvious accounting records, suggesting different administrative traditions despite technological similarities. The cuneiform writing system of Mesopotamia, with its extensive corpus of legal, commercial and literary texts, demonstrates the potential for early writing systems to record complex information, making the brevity of Indus inscriptions particularly puzzling. The ongoing scholarly debate about whether the Indus symbols constitute a true writing system reflects fundamental disagreements about the nature of written communication and the criteria for distinguishing writing from other symbolic systems. Proponents of the writing system interpretation point to the statistical properties of symbol sequences, the consistent directional conventions, and the systematic positional distributions that characterize known scripts. They argue that the brevity of inscriptions reflects specialized functions focused on identification and basic record keeping, rather than limitations in the system's expressive capabilities. Critics of the writing system interpretation argue that the symbol sequences are too brief and repetitive to represent a fully developed script capable of recording the range of information typically associated with early writing systems. They propose alternative interpretations, including complex symbol systems for religious or ceremonial purposes, elaborate identification marks for commercial transactions, or sophisticated but non-linguistic communication systems adapted to specific cultural needs. These scholars point to the absence of longer texts and the apparent lack of variation in inscription types as evidence against interpreting the symbols as representing spoken language. Recent computational approaches have attempted to resolve this debate through quantitative analysis of the script's properties compared to known writing systems and non-linguistic symbol systems. Machine learning algorithms trained on various types of symbolic communication have consistently classified Indus symbol sequences as more similar to writing systems than to decorative patterns or simple identification marks. However, the limited size of the available corpus and the brevity of individual inscriptions continue to limit the conclusiveness of these computational approaches. Non-textual communication methods within Harappan civilization encompass sophisticated systems of standardized imagery, religious symbolism, and administrative marking that complemented and possibly superseded written communication in many contexts. The animal motifs that appear on Harappan seals represent one of the most systematic examples of symbolic communication in the ancient world, with specific animals associated with particular regions, social groups, or administrative functions. The unicorn, depicted on nearly 60% of all seals, appears with remarkable consistency in pose, anatomical details, and associated symbols, suggesting standardized iconographic conventions that conveyed specific meanings to viewers throughout Harappan society. The elephant motif, appearing on approximately 15% of seals, shows consistent artistic treatment with specific anatomical features emphasized across different examples. These elephants typically appear in profile with carefully rendered ears, trunks, and tusks that suggest naturalistic observation combined with standardized artistic conventions. The geographical distribution of elephant seals correlates with regions where these animals would have been encountered in the wild, possibly indicating regional administrative divisions or specialized trade relationships related to ivory and other elephant products. Tiger seals, representing roughly 10% of the corpus, feature consistently depicted stripe patterns and muscular builds that demonstrate both artistic skill and systematic iconographic standards. The technical precision required to carve these detailed animal figures on small steatite seals indicates specialized craftsmen who possessed both artistic training and knowledge of the symbolic systems that governed seal production. The consistency of these animal representations across vast geographical distances suggests either centralized training programs for seal carvers or comprehensive iconographic manuals that standardized artistic production throughout the civilization. Water buffalo seals show particular concentration in the core Indus Valley regions, where these animals played crucial roles in agricultural production and transportation. The artistic treatment of water buffalo emphasizes their distinctive horns and robust builds, with consistent attention to anatomical details that suggest direct observation of living animals. The association of water buffalo imagery with agricultural regions may indicate administrative specialization related to farming activities or livestock management, demonstrating how animal symbolism reflected economic and environmental realities within Harappan society. Geometric symbols accompanying animal motifs on Harappan seals represent another sophisticated communication system that operated alongside textual inscriptions. These symbols, including various combinations of circles, lines, triangles, and more complex geometric forms, appear with systematic variations that suggest meaningful distinctions rather than random decoration. The mathematical precision of these geometric elements, combined with their consistent proportional relationships, indicates sophisticated understanding of geometric principles and systematic symbolic conventions. The standardized imagery systems extended beyond seals to encompass pottery decoration, architectural ornaments, and personal accessories that created visual communication networks throughout Harappan society. Pottery motifs including fish scales, intersecting circles, and plant patterns appear with remarkable consistency across different production centres, indicating shared artistic traditions and possibly symbolic meanings that transcended local cultural variations. The technical precision required to maintain these decorative standards across such vast territories demonstrates sophisticated quality control systems and standardized training practices for artisans. Religious symbolism in Harappan material culture incorporated systematic iconographic elements that may have served communication functions within ritual and ceremonial contexts. The trefoil pattern that appears on the famous priest-king statue and various other objects shows consistent proportional relationships and execution techniques that suggest standardized religious or ceremonial significance. The mathematical precision of these symbolic elements, combined with their widespread distribution, indicates systematic symbolic communication that operated alongside or independently of textual writing systems. The role of seals in trade and administrative functions encompassed complex identification and authentication systems that facilitated commercial transactions across vast distances and cultural boundaries. The technical sophistication of seal production, requiring specialized stone-cutting tools and artistic skills, suggests that seal ownership represented significant investment and possibly official authorization. The standardized formats and quality control evident in seal production indicate systematic administrative oversight that maintained the integrity of these identification systems throughout the commercial network. Archaeological evidence from trading contexts reveals that seals served multiple functions, including commodity identification, quality certification, and transaction authentication. The discovery of clay seal impressions at various sites indicates that seals were pressed into clay ceilings that secured containers or packages during transport, providing tamper-evident security for valuable goods. The standardized impression techniques and consistent quality of these sealings demonstrate systematic commercial practices that protected both merchants and consumers throughout the extensive Harappan trade networks. The sophisticated communication systems that bound Harappan civilization together faced their greatest test as the environmental conditions that had sustained urban prosperity for nearly a millennium began to shift dramatically. By 2500 BC, subtle but persistent changes in climate patterns were altering the fundamental ecological relationships that supported the densely populated cities and extensive agricultural systems of the Indus Valley. These environmental challenges would ultimately reshape Harappan society more profoundly than any political upheaval or military conquest, forcing adaptations that revealed both the resilience and limitations of one of antiquity's most remarkable civilizations. Paleoclimatic evidence from multiple sources indicates that the stable monsoon patterns which had supported Harappan agriculture began experiencing significant variations around 2200 BC. Marine sediment cores from the Arabian Sea reveal decreasing levels of windblown terrestrial material, suggesting reduced monsoon intensity and shorter rainy seasons. Lake sediments from the Thar Desert show increasing aridity, with pollen records indicating the replacement of grassland and woodland vegetation with drought-resistant shrubs and desert plants. Tree ring data from the Himalayan foothills, though limited for this early period, suggests increased frequency of drought years and reduced summer precipitation across the broader South Asian region. The monsoon system that had sustained Harappan civilization operated through complex interactions between ocean temperatures, atmospheric pressure systems, and seasonal wind patterns that brought moisture-laden air from the Arabian Sea across the subcontinent. The summer monsoon typically began in June, bringing heavy rains that recharged groundwater systems, filled reservoirs, and provided the moisture necessary for kharif crops, including rice, cotton, and various legumes. The winter months brought lighter but crucial precipitation that supported rabi crops like wheat and barley, creating the agricultural surplus that fed urban populations and supported craft specialization. Archaeological evidence from multiple Harappan sites reveals the impacts of changing precipitation patterns on urban water management systems. At Mohenjo-Daro, well levels began dropping significantly after 2200 BC, with several wells showing evidence of deepening operations as residents attempted to reach declining groundwater tables. The sophisticated drainage systems that had efficiently managed wastewater for centuries began experiencing capacity problems as reduced water flow concentrated sewage and created sanitation challenges. Excavation layers from this period show increased accumulation of organic waste and evidence of more frequent flooding during intense but brief precipitation events. The gradual desiccation of the Gagahakra river system represented perhaps the most catastrophic environmental challenge facing eastern Harappan settlements. This massive river system, which may have been fed by Himalayan glacial melt and seasonal monsoon runoff, had supported numerous urban centres including Ganweriwala, Rakigahi, and dozens of smaller settlements across what is now the Cholistan Desert and Rajasthan. Satellite imagery and archaeological surveys reveal the remains of this ancient river system, with paleochannels extending over 1,000 kilometres from the foothills of the Himalayas to the Arabian Sea coast. Hydrological analysis of the Gagahakra system suggests that its decline resulted from multiple factors including tectonic activity, climate change, and possible river capture events that diverted water sources. The Sutlej River, which may have been a major tributary of the Gagahakra during Harappan times, appears to have shifted its course eastward to join the Indus system, dramatically reducing water flow in the eastern channels. Simultaneously, the Yamuna River may have been captured by the Ganges system, further reducing the water sources that sustained the Gagahakra's massive flow. The archaeological record along the former Gagahakra channels reveals the gradual abandonment of settlements as water sources became unreliable. At Kalibangan, one of the major urban centres along this river system, excavations show a clear sequence of adaptation and eventual abandonment. The early mature Harappan levels display typical urban planning with sophisticated drainage systems and public buildings. Later levels show evidence of water conservation measures including additional wells, modified drainage systems, and changes in residential architecture that suggest adaptation to water scarcity. The settlement pattern changes along the Gagahakra reveal how communities responded to environmental stress through strategic relocation and resource management. Many smaller settlements were abandoned entirely, with populations apparently concentrating in larger centres that could better manage scarce water resources through collective action. Archaeological surveys show evidence of planned abandonment at many sites, with valuable materials systematically removed and no signs of violent destruction or sudden evacuation. This pattern suggests organised community responses to environmental challenges, rather than chaotic collapse. Natural disasters compounded the challenges posed by gradual climate change, creating acute crises that tested the resilience of Harappan urban systems. Geological evidence indicates that the Indus Valley experienced several major flooding episodes during the late mature Harappan period, possibly triggered by tectonic activity that temporarily dammed river channels and created massive upstream reservoirs. When these natural dams failed, the resulting floods would have been catastrophic, inundating cities and agricultural areas with unprecedented water volumes, carrying massive sediment loads. At Mohenjo-Daro, archaeological evidence reveals multiple flooding episodes that progressively damaged urban infrastructure and forced major reconstruction efforts. The lowest excavated levels show normal Harappan urban planning with well-maintained streets, drainage systems, and residential areas. Higher levels reveal successive layers of flood silt interspersed with evidence of rebuilding activities. The residents raised street levels, reconstructed damaged buildings, and modified drainage systems to cope with changed topographic conditions created by sediment deposition. The flood deposits at Mohenjo-Daro contain distinctive fine-grained sediments characteristic of slack water deposition during major flood events. These layers, sometimes exceeding 1 metre in thickness, indicate prolonged inundation that would have made large areas of the city uninhabitable for extended periods. The discovery of human and animal skeletons in some flood deposits suggests that at least some flooding events occurred with sufficient speed to trap residents and livestock, though the limited number of casualties indicates that most floods may have been preceded by warning signs that allowed evacuation. Seismic activity represented another significant natural hazard that affected Harappan urban centres throughout their history. The Indus Valley lies within a seismically active region where the Indian subcontinent continues to collide with the Eurasian plate, generating earthquakes that can cause severe damage to brick and masonry construction. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals damage patterns consistent with seismic activity, including collapsed walls, tilted foundations, and structural repairs that suggest earthquake damage and subsequent reconstruction efforts. At Dholavira, excavations have revealed evidence of major structural damage that appears consistent with earthquake effects. Several of the massive stone walls that form the city's water management system show evidence of sudden failure and subsequent repair using different construction techniques. The sophisticated reservoirs that were crucial to the city's survival in its arid environment show evidence of damage and modification that may reflect both seismic damage and adaptive responses to changing water availability. The responses of Harappan communities to environmental stress demonstrated remarkable adaptability and innovative problem-solving that enabled many settlements to survive for centuries despite increasingly challenging conditions. Water management systems underwent continuous modification and improvement as communities adapted to changing hydrological conditions. At Dholavira, the original water management system was progressively expanded and modified, with new reservoirs added and existing systems modified to capture and store increasingly scarce precipitation. Agricultural adaptation represented another crucial response to environmental change, with evidence suggesting that Harappan farmers modified their crop selection and farming practices to cope with changing precipitation patterns and soil conditions. Archaeobotanical evidence from later Harappan levels shows increased cultivation of drought-resistant crops including millets and sorghum, which require less water than the wheat and barley that had dominated earlier agricultural systems. The adoption of these alternative crops may have been crucial to maintaining agricultural productivity as monsoon patterns became less reliable. Settlement relocation became increasingly common as environmental conditions deteriorated in traditional Harappan heartlands. Archaeological surveys reveal the establishment of new settlements in areas that had previously been marginal to Harappan occupation, including regions with more reliable water sources or better soil conditions. The Gujarat coast, which had been important for maritime trade, saw increased settlement density as communities relocated from the increasingly arid interior regions. These coastal settlements maintained many Harappan cultural traditions while adapting to new environmental conditions and economic opportunities. Trade pattern modifications reflected both environmental constraints and adaptive strategies that enabled Harappan merchants to maintain commercial networks despite changing conditions in traditional production centres. The decline of some inland production centres led to increased importance of coastal settlements and alternative trade routes. Archaeological evidence suggests that trade in agricultural products decreased, while commerce in manufactured goods and raw materials from diverse sources became more important. The standardized production systems that had characterized Harappan crafts enabled continued manufacturing, even as production locations shifted in response to environmental pressures. The technological innovations that emerged during this period of environmental stress demonstrated the continued vitality of Harappan engineering and adaptation capabilities. Water conservation techniques became increasingly sophisticated, with evidence of improved well construction, more efficient irrigation systems, and innovative storage methods that maximized the utility of limited water resources. At several sites, archaeologists have found evidence of rainwater harvesting systems that collected and stored precipitation from building roofs and paved areas, supplementing traditional water sources during periods of scarcity. Agricultural technology also advanced in response to environmental challenges, with evidence of improved ploughing techniques, crop rotation systems, and soil management practices that maintain productivity despite deteriorating conditions. The development of more efficient irrigation systems enabled cultivation of previously marginal lands, while improved storage techniques reduced post-harvest losses that became increasingly critical as agricultural surpluses diminished. These technological adaptations enabled many communities to maintain viable agricultural systems even as environmental conditions became more challenging. Urban planning adaptations reflected the need to modify traditional Harappan city layouts to cope with changed environmental conditions. Later Harappan settlements often featured more compact layouts that reduced infrastructure requirements while maintaining essential services. Drainage systems were modified to handle both water scarcity and occasional intense flooding, with improved storage and distribution systems that managed limited water resources more efficiently. Housing designs incorporated features that provided better protection from extreme weather events, while maintaining the privacy and comfort standards that characterized Harappan domestic architecture. The demographic changes that accompanied environmental stress reveal both the challenges and resilience of Harappan society during this transitional period. Population concentrations shifted from the traditional urban centres toward regions with more favourable environmental conditions, but this redistribution occurred gradually over several centuries rather than through sudden abandonment or collapse. Archaeological evidence suggests that many communities maintained their cultural identity and technological capabilities even as they adapted to new locations and environmental conditions. Regional variations in environmental impact and adaptive responses created a complex pattern of continuity and change across Harappan territory. Some areas, particularly along reliable river systems and coastal regions, maintained relatively stable conditions and continued to support urban centres with traditional Harappan characteristics. Other regions experienced more severe environmental stress that required fundamental changes in settlement patterns and economic organisation. This regional diversity in environmental conditions and adaptive responses contributed to the gradual transformation of Harappan civilization rather than uniform decline or collapse. The evidence for continued cultural transmission and technological development during this period of environmental stress demonstrates the fundamental resilience of Harappan society and its capacity for adaptive innovation. Despite the challenges posed by climate change, natural disasters, and resource scarcity, many communities maintained sophisticated urban systems, advanced technologies, and extensive trade networks that preserved essential elements of Harappan civilization while adapting to new environmental realities. This adaptive capacity would prove crucial to the civilization's ability to influence subsequent cultural developments in South Asia even as traditional urban centres declined and transformed. The adaptive capacity that had enabled Harappan communities to weather environmental challenges for centuries ultimately proved insufficient to prevent the fundamental transformation that began around 1900 BC. Archaeological evidence from across the Indus Valley reveals a gradual but unmistakable shift from the sophisticated urban centres that had defined mature Harappan civilization to smaller, less complex settlements that retained some traditional elements while incorporating significant innovations. This transformation did not occur uniformly across the vast Harappan territory, creating a complex mosaic of continuity and change that challenges simple narratives of civilizational collapse. At Harappa itself, the archaeological sequence reveals the clearest evidence for urban decline during the late Harappan period. The uppermost levels of excavation show dramatic changes in settlement organisation, with the carefully planned street grids of the mature period giving way to more haphazard construction patterns. Houses built during this phase often reused bricks from earlier structures, indicating either resource scarcity or the breakdown of centralized building material production. the sophisticated drainage systems that had been meticulously maintained for centuries began to fail, with block channels filled with debris and new construction built directly over former drainage lines. The population of Harappa appears to have contracted significantly during this period, with large areas of the former city showing evidence of abandonment rather than continued occupation. The massive defensive walls that had enclosed the mature Harappan settlement were breached in multiple locations, not through military assault but through gradual decay and stone robbing by later inhabitants. Archaeological deposits from this period contain significantly fewer standardized artifacts, suggesting the breakdown of the quality control systems that had maintained consistent production standards across the civilization. However, the transformation at Harappa was not simply one of decline and abandonment. The late Harappan levels contain evidence of new cultural elements that had not appeared in earlier periods, including different pottery styles, modified burial practices, and architectural innovations that suggest cultural contact with populations from outside the traditional Harappan sphere. These new elements were integrated with surviving Harappan traditions, creating hybrid cultural forms that maintained some continuity with the past while adapting to changed circumstances. Mohenjo-Daro experienced a somewhat different trajectory of transformation, with evidence suggesting more rapid abandonment of the major urban centre, combined with continued occupation of peripheral areas. The Great Bath, which had served as a focal point for community activities throughout the mature period, shows evidence of neglect and eventual abandonment, with the sophisticated water management systems that had maintained the facility falling into disrepair. The surrounding residential areas reveal a pattern of gradual depopulation, with houses abandoned in sequence rather than through sudden evacuation. The final occupation levels at Mohenjo-Daro contain artifacts that represent a significant departure from traditional Harappan material culture. Pottery from these levels shows cruder manufacturing techniques, with hand-formed vessels replacing the precisely wheel-thrown ceramics that had characterized earlier periods. The standardized brick construction that had defined Harappan architecture was replaced by more expedient building techniques using whatever materials were readily available, including stones robbed from earlier structures and mud brick construction that required less technical expertise. Archaeological evidence from the Mohenjo-Daro area suggests that the abandonment of the major urban centre was accompanied by the establishment of smaller settlements in the surrounding region. These new communities maintained some Harappan cultural elements while developing distinct local characteristics that reflected adaptation to changed environmental and social conditions. The pottery from these settlements combines traditional Harappan forms with new shapes and decorative techniques that suggest cultural innovation rather than simple decline. The transformation patterns varied significantly across different regions of the former Harappan territory, creating a complex geographical mosaic of cultural change. In Gujarat, the major urban centres like Dholavira and Lothal experienced gradual decline, but many smaller settlements continued to flourish and even expanded during the late Harappan period. These communities maintained sophisticated water management systems and continued to engage in long-distance trade, though the scale and standardization of these activities decreased compared to the mature Harappan period. The coastal settlements of Gujarat show particular resilience during this transitional period, with communities adapting their economic focus toward marine resources and coastal trade networks. Archaeological excavations at sites like Rangpur and Rojdi reveal continued occupation through the late Harappan period, with material culture that combines traditional elements with new innovations. These communities developed new pottery styles that incorporated both Harappan traditions and external influences, creating distinctive regional variants that maintained cultural continuity while adapting to changing conditions. The Punjab region, which had been central to mature Harappan civilization, experienced more dramatic transformation during the late Harappan period. Many of the major urban centres were abandoned or significantly reduced in size, while new settlements appeared in locations that had not been important during the mature period. These new communities often featured different settlement organisation patterns, with less emphasis on rigid urban planning and more flexible arrangements that could adapt to local conditions and resource availability. Archaeological surveys in the Punjab region have identified numerous late Harappan sites that show evidence of cultural continuity combined with significant innovation. The pottery from these sites maintains some traditional Harappan forms while incorporating new shapes and decorative techniques that suggest contact with populations from the northern hills and western regions. Burial practices at these sites show modifications from traditional Harappan customs, with some communities adopting extended burial positions and different gravegood assemblages that reflect changing religious beliefs or social organisation. The Cholistan Desert region, which had supported numerous settlements during the mature Harappan period, when the Gaga-Hakra river system provided reliable water sources, experienced the most dramatic transformation as environmental conditions deteriorated. Archaeological surveys reveal that most settlements in this region were abandoned during the late Harappan period, with populations apparently relocating to areas with more reliable water sources. However, some communities adapted to the changing conditions by modifying their subsistence strategies and settlement patterns. The few late Harappan sites identified in the Cholistan region show evidence of communities that had adapted to increasingly arid conditions through innovative water conservation techniques and modified agricultural practices. These settlements were typically much smaller than their mature Harappan predecessors and featured different architectural styles that reflected adaptation to resource scarcity. The material culture from these sites suggests that communities maintained some Harappan traditions while developing new technologies and social organisation patterns suited to their changed environment. Regional variations in late Harappan material culture reflect both local adaptations to environmental conditions and cultural contact with populations from outside the traditional Harappan sphere. In the northern regions, late Harappan pottery shows influences from hill cultures that may have been expanding southward as climate change affected their traditional territories. These influences appear in the form of new vessel shapes, decorative techniques, and manufacturing methods that were integrated with surviving Harappan traditions. The western regions of the former Harappan territory show evidence of cultural contact with populations from Balochistan and the Iranian plateau, with late Harappan sites containing artifacts that reflect these external connections. Copper and bronze objects from these sites sometimes show manufacturing techniques and decorative styles that differ from traditional Harappan metalwork, suggesting either population movement or intensified trade relationships with western regions. These external influences were typically integrated with local traditions, rather than replacing them entirely, creating distinctive regional variants of late Harappan culture. The eastern regions of the Harappan territory, particularly areas along the former Gaga-Hakra system, show evidence of cultural continuity that persisted even as environmental conditions deteriorated. Late Harappan sites in these regions often maintain traditional settlement organisation patterns and material culture elements, though typically at reduced scales compared to mature Harappan communities. These sites suggest that some populations were able to maintain essential elements of Harappan civilization even as the larger urban system collapsed. Theories explaining the decline and transformation of Harappan civilization have evolved significantly as archaeological evidence has accumulated and analytical techniques have improved. Early interpretations focused on catastrophic explanations, including foreign invasion, natural disasters, or sudden environmental collapse. These theories were influenced by the discovery of skeletal remains at Mohenjo-Daro that were initially interpreted as evidence of violent destruction, though subsequent analysis has shown that these remains likely represent natural deaths rather than massacre victims. The invasion hypothesis, popularized by early archaeologists who sought to correlate Harappan decline with the arrival of Indo-European speakers in South Asia, proposed that nomadic peoples from Central Asia conquered and destroyed Harappan cities. This theory was supported by the apparent absence of defensive preparations at Harappan sites and the lack of obvious continuity between Harappan and later South Asian cultures. However, archaeological evidence has not supported this interpretation, with no clear evidence of violent destruction at most Harappan sites and increasing recognition of cultural continuities that link Harappan and post-Harappan developments. Environmental degradation theories have gained increasing support as paleoclimatic evidence has accumulated, demonstrating significant climate change during the late Harappan period. These theories propose that decreasing monsoon precipitation, river system changes, and increasing aridity created conditions that could no longer support the dense urban populations and intensive agriculture that had characterized mature Harappan civilization. The gradual nature of environmental change would explain the extended process of urban decline and transformation rather than sudden collapse. The environmental degradation theories are supported by multiple lines of evidence, including marine sediment cores, lake sediment analysis, and archaeological evidence for changing water management practices at Harappan sites. However, these theories must account for the regional variations in decline patterns and the continued flourishing of some communities, even as others were abandoned. The complexity of environmental change and its varied regional impacts suggests that environmental factors were important but not solely determinative in explaining Harappan transformation. Internal social collapse theories propose that the sophisticated administrative and social systems that had coordinated Harappan civilization gradually broke down due to internal contradictions or external pressures that exceeded their adaptive capacity. These theories emphasize the apparent absence of extreme social stratification in Harappan society, suggesting that the consensus-based systems that may have governed these communities were vulnerable to disruption when faced with multiple simultaneous challenges, including environmental stress, economic disruption, and social change. The internal collapse theories are supported by evidence for the breakdown of standardization systems that had maintained quality control and coordination across the Harappan territory. The disappearance of standardized weights and measures, the decline in craft production quality, and the abandonment of systematic urban planning all suggest the failure of institutional systems that had previously coordinated complex social and economic activities. However, these theories must explain why some communities were able to maintain sophisticated organization, while others experienced institutional breakdown. Economic disruption theories focus on the breakdown of the extensive trade networks that had supported Harappan prosperity and urban development. These theories propose that environmental change, political instability in trading partner regions, or internal transportation difficulties disrupted the commercial systems that had enabled craft specialization and urban growth. The decline in long-distance trade would have reduced the economic surpluses necessary to support large urban populations and specialized craftsmen, forcing communities to adopt more localized and self-sufficient economic strategies. Archaeological evidence for economic disruption includes the decline in standardized craft production, the reduced distribution of exotic materials like lapis lazuli and marine shells, and the apparent breakdown of the systematic commercial networks that had characterized mature Harappan civilization. However, evidence for continued trade and craft production at some late Harappan sites suggests that economic disruption was not uniform across the former Harappan territory, and that some communities successfully adapted their economic strategies to change conditions. Archaeological evidence for continuity and change during the late Harappan period reveals complex patterns that challenge simple models of civilizational collapse or replacement. Many late Harappan sites contain material culture assemblages that combine traditional Harappan elements with new innovations, suggesting cultural evolution rather than complete discontinuity. Pottery traditions, architectural techniques, and craft production methods show both persistence of traditional knowledge and adaptation to new conditions and influences. The relationship between late Harappan cultures and subsequent South Asian civilizations represents one of the most significant questions in understanding the long-term impact of Harappan civilization. Archaeological evidence suggests multiple connections between late Harappan communities and latest cultural developments, including technological continuities, settlement pattern influences, and possible linguistic connections. However, the nature and extent of these connections remain subjects of ongoing research and debate. Technological continuities between Harappan and post-Harappan cultures include water management techniques, agricultural practices, and craft production methods that persisted in modified forms long after the decline of urban Harappan civilization. The sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering that characterized Harappan cities appears to have influenced later South Asian urban development, while agricultural techniques developed during the Harappan period continue to be used by subsequent farming communities throughout the region. Settlement pattern influences can be traced through the continued occupation of some Harappan sites and the establishment of later settlements in locations that had been important during the Harappan period. The urban planning principles that had governed Harappan city construction appear to have influenced later South Asian urban development, though typically at smaller scales and with modifications that reflected changed social and economic conditions. The question of linguistic continuity between Harappan and later South Asian cultures remains highly speculative due to the undeciphered nature of the Harappan script and the lack of contemporary textual evidence. However, some scholars have proposed connections between Harappan cultural elements and later South Asian linguistic and religious traditions, suggesting possible continuities that persisted through the transformation period, despite the breakdown of urban Harappan civilization. The cultural threads that connected the transformed late Harappan communities to subsequent South Asian civilizations proved far more enduring than the urban centres that had originally woven them. As the last recognisably Harappan settlements evolved into new cultural forms around 1300 BC, the technological innovations, social practices, and conceptual frameworks developed during 2 millennia of Indus Valley civilization continued to influence the subcontinent's development in ways that archaeologists and historians are only beginning to understand. The legacy of Harappan civilization persisted not through monumental architecture or preserved texts, but through the practical knowledge and cultural practices that communities carried forward as they adapted to new environmental and social conditions. The hydraulic engineering principles that had enabled Harappan cities to manage water resources in challenging environments became foundational to subsequent South Asian urban development. The sophisticated understanding of drainage gradients, water storage techniques, and municipal sanitation systems developed by Harappan engineers influenced city planning throughout the subcontinent for millennia. Archaeological excavations at later urban centres including Taxila, Pataliputra, and early historic sites in Gujarat reveal drainage systems and water management techniques that echo Harappan innovations, though typically implemented at smaller scales and with local modifications reflecting changed materials and construction methods. The standardized measurement systems that had coordinated Harappan commerce and construction continued to influence South Asian trade and craftsmanship long after the collapse of the civilization's urban centers. The binary and decimal weight systems developed by Harappan merchants established precedents for systematic commercial measurement that persisted in modified forms throughout subsequent periods. Archaeological analysis of weights from later South Asian sites reveals proportional relationships and mathematical principles that suggest continuity with Harappan measurement traditions, though adapted to new materials and commercial contexts. Urban planning concepts pioneered by Harappan engineers influenced settlement organisation patterns across South Asia for centuries after the civilization's transformation. The grid-patterned street layouts that characterised major Harappan cities established precedents for systematic urban organisation that appeared in later South Asian urban centres. The integration of residential, commercial and public areas within planned urban frameworks, combined with sophisticated infrastructure systems, provided models for city development that influenced subsequent urban planning traditions throughout the region. Craft production techniques developed by Harappan artisans contributed to technological traditions that persisted and evolved throughout South Asian history. The precision drilling methods used to create Harappan stone beads influenced jewellery-making traditions that continued for millennia, with technical knowledge passed down through artisan communities that maintained specialised skills across generations. Bronze-working techniques, including lost wax casting methods and alloy composition knowledge, provided foundations for metallurgical traditions that supported later South Asian technological development. The cotton cultivation and textile production innovations that had made Harappan communities among the world's first large-scale cotton processors established agricultural and manufacturing traditions that became central to South Asian economic development. Archaeological evidence suggests that cotton growing techniques developed during the Harappan period continued to be used by farming communities throughout the northwestern subcontinent, while textile production methods influenced craft traditions that eventually made South Asian cotton textiles globally significant commodities. Agricultural practices developed by Harappan farmers, including crop rotation systems, irrigation techniques, and soil management methods, provided foundations for farming traditions that sustained South Asian populations through subsequent millennia. The integration of multiple crop types, including wheat, barley, legumes, and cotton, within systematic agricultural systems established precedents for diversified farming that enhanced food security and supported population growth in later periods. Water buffalo domestication and management techniques developed during the Harappan period continued to be central to South Asian agriculture, with these animals remaining crucial to farming systems throughout the region. Religious and ritual practices that characterized Harappan civilization may have influenced the development of later South Asian religious traditions, though establishing direct connections remains challenging due to the absence of decipherable textual evidence. The emphasis on ritual bathing evident in Harappan archaeological sites appears to have contributed to purification practices that became central to later South Asian religious systems. Fire altars and offering practices documented at Harappan sites suggest ritual traditions that may have influenced the development of fire worship and sacrifice practices that characterized later Vedic religion. The apparent reverence for fertility symbolism and mother goddess figures evident in Harappan material culture may have contributed to goddess worship traditions that remained prominent throughout South Asian religious development. Terracotta figurines and artistic motifs from Harappan sites suggest religious concepts focused on agricultural fertility and feminine divine power that persisted in various forms through subsequent cultural periods. The integration of animal symbolism in Harappan religious iconography may have influenced the development of animal worship and symbolic traditions that became important elements of later South Asian religious systems. Urban sanitation concepts pioneered by Harappan engineers influenced public health practices and municipal organisation throughout subsequent South Asian history. The systematic approach to waste management and water supply that characterised Harappan cities established precedents for urban hygiene that influenced later city planning and public health measures. The integration of private household sanitation with municipal infrastructure systems provided models for urban organisation that addressed public health concerns while maintaining individual privacy and comfort. The gradual transformation of Harappan civilization into new cultural forms created regional traditions that influenced subsequent historical developments across South Asia. In Gujarat, late Harappan communities maintained maritime trade connections and craft production traditions that contributed to the region's continued importance as a commercial centre. The technological knowledge and commercial practices developed during the Harappan period provided foundations for later Gujarati merchant communities that became prominent in Indian Ocean trade networks. Punjab region communities that had adapted Harappan agricultural and craft traditions contributed to the development of farming and manufacturing practices that supported later historical civilizations, including the Mauryan and Gupta empires. The understanding of irrigation techniques, crop management, and animal husbandry developed during the Harappan period provided essential knowledge for communities that eventually became integrated into larger political systems while maintaining distinctive local traditions. The rediscovery of Harappan civilization began during the British colonial period, when railway construction projects in the Punjab inadvertently exposed ancient archaeological sites that had been buried for millennia. In 1856, British engineers building the East Indian Railway between Karachi and Lahore discovered that local contractors were using ancient fired bricks of unusual uniformity and quality as ballast for railway construction. These bricks, quarried from mounds near the village of Harappa, displayed technical characteristics that suggested sophisticated, ancient manufacturing rather than recent production. Alexander Cunningham, the first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, conducted preliminary investigations at Harappa in 1872 to 1873, recognizing that the site contained remains of significant archaeological importance. Cunningham's excavations were limited in scope, but he recovered artifacts including seals bearing unknown script symbols and sophisticated pottery that indicated an advanced ancient civilization. His published reports described Harappa as representing a previously unknown culture that predated known South Asian historical periods, though the full significance of these discoveries was not immediately recognized. The systematic archaeological investigation of Harappan sites began in the 1920s under the direction of Sir John Marshall, who served as Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India from 1902 to 1928. Marshall organised comprehensive excavations at both Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, employing systematic stratigraphic techniques that revealed the extent and sophistication of Indus Valley civilization. His team's discoveries included the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, sophisticated urban planning systems, and thousands of artifacts that demonstrated the civilization's technological and artistic achievements. Marshall's excavations at Mohenjo-Daro revealed urban planning and engineering capabilities that astonished the archaeological community and challenged existing understanding of ancient South Asian history. The discovery of sophisticated drainage systems, standardized brick construction, and systematic street layouts demonstrated that South Asia had supported advanced urban civilizations millennia before the historically documented Mauryan period. Marshall's published reports in the 1920s introduced Harappan civilization to international scholarly attention and established it as one of the world's earliest urban civilizations alongside Mesopotamia and Egypt. The work of Mortimer Wheeler, who directed major excavations at Harappa between 1946 and 1948, introduced more rigorous archaeological methods and provided detailed stratigraphic analysis of Harappan urban development. Wheeler's excavations revealed the defensive walls and gateway systems that protected Harappan cities, while his systematic approach to artifact analysis established chronological frameworks that enabled comparison with other ancient civilizations. His publications emphasized the sophisticated planning and engineering that characterized Harappan urban centers, contributing to scholarly recognition of the civilization's technological achievements. Wheeler's excavations also uncovered evidence that initially suggested violent destruction of Harappan cities, including skeletal remains at Mohenjo-Daro that he interpreted as massacre victims. These discoveries contributed to theories of foreign invasion that dominated scholarly interpretation of Harappan decline for several decades. However, subsequent reanalysis of Wheeler's evidence using improved forensic techniques has shown that the skeletal remains likely represent natural deaths rather than violence, contributing to revised understanding of Harappan transformation processes. Post-independence archaeological research in both India and Pakistan has dramatically expanded knowledge of Harappan civilization through the discovery of hundreds of new sites and the application of advanced analytical techniques. Indian archaeologists, including B.B. Lal, S.R. Rao, and R.S. Bisht, have conducted major excavations at sites including Kalibangan, Lothal, and Dholavira, revealing regional variations in Harappan culture and the civilization's adaptation to diverse environmental conditions. Pakistani archaeologists, including F.A. Khan, Emzar Mughal, and Rafiq Mughal, have systematically surveyed the Indus Valley and identified numerous previously unknown Harappan settlements. The discovery of Dholavira by Indian archaeologist R.S. Bisht in 1967 revealed sophisticated water management systems that demonstrated Harappan engineering capabilities in challenging arid environments. Bisht's excavations uncovered elaborate reservoirs, drainage systems, and urban planning features that showed how Harappan communities adapted their technological systems to local environmental conditions. The site's preservation in Gujarat's Rann of Kutch provided exceptional insights into Harappan construction techniques and urban organisation that complemented discoveries at other major sites. Systematic archaeological surveys conducted since the 1960s have identified over 1,400 Harappan sites across Pakistan and northwestern India, revealing the true extent of the civilization and its regional variations. The Kholistan Desert Surveys, led by Pakistani archaeologist Mistar Mughal, identified hundreds of sites along the ancient Ghaggar-Hakra river system, demonstrating that Harappan civilization extended far beyond the Indus Valley proper. These surveys revealed settlement hierarchies and regional specialization patterns that provided new insights into Harappan political and economic organization. Advanced dating techniques including radiocarbon dating, thermoluminescence dating, and archaeomagnetic dating have provided precise chronological frameworks for Harappan development and transformation. These techniques have established that Harappan civilization emerged around 3300 BC, reached urban maturity by 2600 BC, and underwent gradual transformation between 1900 and 1300 BC. The refined chronology has enabled more sophisticated analysis of cultural change processes and comparison with contemporary civilizations in other regions. Satellite imagery and remote sensing technologies have revolutionized Harappan archaeological research by enabling identification of ancient settlement patterns and environmental changes across vast areas. Satellite analysis has traced the course of the ancient Ghaggar-Hakra river system and identified numerous archaeological sites that would be difficult to locate through ground survey alone. These technologies have also provided insights into ancient landscape changes and environmental conditions that influenced Harappan settlement patterns and agricultural systems. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry surveys at major Harappan sites have revealed subsurface features without destructive excavation, enabling more comprehensive understanding of urban layouts and construction techniques. These non-invasive techniques have identified buried structures, street systems, and drainage networks that provide detailed insights into Harappan urban planning, while preserving archaeological deposits for future research using improved techniques. DNA analysis of skeletal remains from Harappan sites has provided insights into population genetics and possible migration patterns. Though the limited preservation of organic materials in South Asian archaeological contexts constrains the application of these techniques, available genetic evidence suggests that Harappan populations were genetically diverse and showed connections to both South Asian and Central Asian populations, though the interpretation of these patterns remains subject to ongoing research and debate. Climate reconstruction techniques including paleoclimatology, sediment analysis, and pollen studies have provided detailed understanding of environmental conditions during Harappan periods and their role in cultural change. These studies have confirmed that significant climate change occurred during the late Harappan period, with decreased monsoon precipitation and increased aridity affecting agricultural systems and water resources. The environmental data has supported theories linking Harappan transformation to climate change, while revealing the complex regional variations in environmental impact. Efforts to decipher the Indus script continue to employ increasingly sophisticated computational and linguistic analysis techniques, though the script remains undeciphered despite decades of intensive research. Computer-assisted analysis has identified statistical patterns in symbol usage and sequence structures that provide insights into the script's organization and possible functions. Machine learning approaches have been applied to identify potential linguistic features and compare the script with known writing systems, though the brevity of available inscriptions continues to limit progress toward full decipherment. International collaboration has become increasingly important in Harappan research, with scholars from multiple countries contributing expertise in archaeology, linguistics, computer science, and environmental studies. Joint research projects have combined resources and expertise to address complex questions about Harappan civilization that require interdisciplinary approaches. These collaborations have facilitated the sharing of data and analytical techniques that have advanced understanding of Harappan culture and its broader significance in world history. The contemporary significance of Harappan civilization extends beyond academic research to encompass questions of cultural identity, historical interpretation, and archaeological heritage preservation. In both India and Pakistan, Harappan sites have become important symbols of ancient cultural achievement and sources of national pride. The sophisticated urban planning and technological innovations of Harappan civilization provide models for sustainable development and environmental management that remain relevant to contemporary challenges. Heritage preservation efforts at major Harappan sites face ongoing challenges from environmental degradation, urban development pressure, and inadequate funding for conservation programs. Sites like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa require continuous conservation work to prevent deterioration from salt crystallization, groundwater changes, and structural instability. International organizations, including UNESCO, have provided support for preservation efforts, though the scale of conservation needs exceeds available resources. Educational programs and public outreach initiatives have increased awareness of Harappan civilization and its significance in world history. Museums in India, Pakistan, and other countries display Harappan artifacts and provide educational resources that introduce the civilization to broader audiences. Archaeological site museums at locations like Lothal and Dholavira provide visitors with insights into Harappan urban planning and technological achievements while promoting heritage preservation awareness. The ongoing research into Harappan civilization continues to reveal new insights into one of humanity's earliest urban societies and its contributions to South Asian cultural development. As archaeological techniques advance and new sites are discovered, our understanding of Harappan achievements in urban planning, technology, and social organization continues to evolve. The civilization's emphasis on systematic planning, quality control, and environmental adaptation provides lessons that remain relevant to contemporary challenges in sustainable development and urban management. The legacy of Harappan civilization thus extends from its immediate influence on subsequent South Asian cultures to its contemporary significance as an example of early urban innovation and environmental adaptation. The rediscovery and ongoing study of this remarkable civilization continues to enrich our understanding of human cultural development and the enduring impact of technological and social innovations developed over 4 millennia ago. The Indus Valley civilization stands as testament to human ingenuity and adaptability, demonstrating how sophisticated societies can emerge, flourish, and transform while leaving lasting influences that persist across millennia of cultural change.